High fly ball into right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the ropes. Goodbye, home run. Don Mattingly. Tuck lights one. Deep left field. Down the line. That ball is out of here. Out of here.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Tablesetters, covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined by my tag team partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
What's up? What's up? Episode 106. Welcome, everybody. It is officially nail-biting season. I'm over here. We're recording here on a Tuesday night. Lots of games of consequence here. We're going to get into it. I, as a Met fan, kind of watching every pitch, trying to live and die by this stuff. This is what the Mets do to us, but it's that time of season right now.
Yeah, for sure. We have a lot of games with some consequences. Devin mentioned that big series between Detroit and Cleveland kicked off earlier today, and we will discuss watching Cleveland get a win on Scooble Day, which does not bode well for the chances of avoiding that collapse with the Detroit Tigers. And we'll talk about the historic nature of that collapse, compare it to the collapse we're seeing at the New York Mets. Devin's talking about if either one of these teams can avoid it. Of course, they still have a week left. The wild card series will kick off in just 7 days from when we're recording. Believe it or not, Devin, we're at the finish line.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think like the next time we're recording. I mean, we don't know. The next time we're recording, maybe it's right either the day before a playoff game or the day of a playoff game, depending on when we decide to get back on here. Yeah, it kind of feels like it's coming out of nowhere. And at the same time, and I've said this a lot the last few weeks, I just can't believe how much is still up for grabs with these last 7 days or so left. And there's a ton to talk about right now.
Yeah, when I think Manfred and the crew drew this up with the extra wild card spot, I don't think they could have planned it any better. And I understand you were giving them a lot of credit for the intention, adding the extra spice with keeping all these other teams in the mix. But if there is a barometer of this working with the extra playoff spot, it's a week like this where you have a lot of cities, like you mentioned, biting their nails and keeping them invested. I'm sure the Detroit Tigers would wish that the Central was already wrapped up, but it's good drama across all the board. And I think baseball's in the spotlight. We mentioned before, football obviously takes a lot of that stage away from baseball, but it seems like we're getting a lot of spotlight shifting back to Major League Baseball. And it's because of weeks like this, and we're not even in the postseason yet.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's not just the Tigers and the Mets. I mean, those two teams are in the news because of kind of trying to avoid collapses. But you have a lot of other things that we're looking at, whether it be, the Toronto Blue Jays desperately trying to hold on to the American League East crown, the Yankees trying to chase them down. Houston trying to get back in the playoff mix, whether it be wild card or division. There's just not that much sewn up right now. And we could talk about the MVP races, which we will as well. Things like that still up for grabs out there too.
And make sure you guys go check out what Brady Farkas was over there. We mentioned him on this pod, refused to lose what the Seattle Mariners coverage. And he was in Houston for that sweep that he got to witness. A lot of great coverage in the clubhouse covering the team. So if you guys are looking for the pulse of the Seattle Mariners and how that franchise is feeling, looking for their first AL West crown since 2001 and only their second playoff appearance since that time as well. There's a lot of fun things happening in Seattle. I know people are not looking to already pop the champagne for a playoff berth, but they're getting close. And that sweep was a statement this weekend.
Yeah, and as of right now, in certain places, when you look at World Series, like percentage of your chance of winning the World Series, the team that leads right now in the percentage is the Seattle Mariners. Last time I looked, it was around 21 point something percent. They're at the top, and some people are like, "Why? Like how? They just got atop the division." I get it. I really do understand it. They're a very, very well-rounded team. Brian Wu not making his next start. I think they're being careful with him. By all reports I've seen, it sounds like he's going to be okay, and it looks like they're just going to try to treat him with kid gloves a little bit and get to the postseason and then turn him back on. Hopefully that all works out.
So at the top of the show, we want to remind you guys to follow us on Instagram and on the X Machine at Tablesetters Pod, posting clips, having conversation, also posting polls that we will discuss here on this show. And if you are so kind, please leave a 5-star review so other people can find us in the algorithm. I saw we were trending again on Good Pods. Whatever it takes, get the good word of baseball out there. share it with your friends, discuss baseball, and keep it in the forefront.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Always nice to see our name atop those lists. And, another goal of ours, we like to get in that top 250 Apple Podcast list as well, which can be difficult sometimes. We've been there. I think we're in the top 200 maybe a week or two ago. So we do get in there every once in a while, and it's thanks to you guys that listen and share all that kind of stuff, interact with us on social media as well. But let's get it going.
All right, let's head into our opening saying, talk about all the news around baseball. All right, so we had some big news dropping, and we were going to record earlier today and pull the curtain back a little bit. Kind of happy we didn't, because this news dropped in the middle of the day. Looking forward to 2026. I know it's part of your opening say.
Yeah, thankfully, we ended up recording at night because I had to go apple picking with my family. One of my very favorite things. I will say before I get into it, for those of you guys that are loyal listeners, you know that I suffered an Achilles tear back in the end of June. And so I'm about 11 weeks removed from surgery here. And today, between apple picking and then coming back and doing some yard work, topsoil, seeds, some spots where trees were cut down. First time since the injury that I went over 10,000 steps today. So a little pat myself on the back there. I'm proud of that. A little milestone for me, trying to get back into it. But anyway, let's get to the real stuff that people care about here. My opening say is about the ABS challenge system. We just got word today that it is official 2026. We will see it in place in Major League Baseball, not just in the All-Star game, not just in the minor leagues. A little rundown here. I think most of you listening are probably pretty familiar, but we'll go through it. Each team will get 2 challenges and can keep them if successful. The challenges can only be initiated by a pitcher, catcher, or batter, and the request must come right after the pitch. So different than coming from the dugout for other types of challenges. To signal a challenge, the pitcher, catcher, or batter is going to tap his helmet or tap the hat or the helmet to let the umpire know right away. Cannot get any help from the dugout or other players on the field. I love that. I wonder what the punishment would be if they suspect that. That'd be an interesting thing to look at as well. In each extra inning, a team will be awarded a challenge if it has none remaining entering the inning. And the ABS challenge, this is what I love. It uses cameras set up around the perimeter of the field to track the location of each pitch, and a graphic on the scoreboard shows the result of the challenge. I love that. If there's any people that watch tennis from time to time, they've been doing this for a very long time with the ins and outs. You can challenge it very quickly, show it up on the big board so the whole crowd can get a look. I saw a clip about an hour before we came on here of what some people call one of the worst ABS challenges ever. It was Spencer Jones, I guess, not too long ago. Yep. Yeah, and it's a strike 3 call, and he immediately challenges it. And just like, it's not like it's right on the line, like Chloe. It's right there. And he just kind of turns his back and goes away. So there's going to be those moments. And that's what I want to get to here. There's a few different ways to go with it. I mean, I think it's going to get more interesting to talk about once it's in place. Right now, we're kind of just guessing and kind of, trying to come up with things like, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. But I will say the first place my mind goes, and there's a few things, but the first place my mind goes is how it affects catchers. For many years now, we've talked about guys like Patrick Bailey being so valuable because they're great framers. And we've talked about a lot of catchers changing the way they position themselves, not worrying about blocking the ball as much, which drives some old school fans crazy, and more so worried about catcher framing. And some people think it's led to more pass balls. Other people will come bring the stats out and say, look, no, it actually hasn't. So there's all that. So my first thing is, it's going to be interesting to see, is framing just a thing of the past? And I believe catchers, maybe some of the value now is not going to come from framing, but it'll come from who's really good at these challenges, who knows the strike zone really, really well. And I believe the zone shifts and changes based on the batter's height as well, which might help a guy like Aaron Judge, who we know gets rung up sometimes at the ankles. But that's where the first thing, I wonder if blocking comes back a little bit as a super valuable thing. And obviously throwing is still going to be a big thing. But I wonder if just that knowledge of the strike zone and knowing when to challenge and when not, maybe we get a baseball savant analytic or a StatCast thing on that. very soon as the ABS challenge system comes in. I will say, just before I turn it over to you to talk about the catcher stuff, I also will say I'm glad we're not just doing robo-umps. This is the right way to go, right? They just posted an umpire last night got 25 calls wrong. So we're going to get rid of some of that. And it's not just taking the umpires and the human element completely out of the game. I think it puts some pressure on the umpires, but some of them might be a little bit relieved, and I think they should be. But your thoughts on the catching position and how it might affect them?
Yeah, I thought of the same thing you were saying, and we were seeing it kind of go viral with all the different fan bases and the different personalities on social media with showing missed calls in the past and big missed calls from their team. And I think this happens multiple times a game. I think it will play a part because if you look at the way players have been coming up through baseball, there's been a lot of emphasis on getting strikes, even the balls that are not close in the zone. Framing has been a big piece. It will change. I think there's some unintended consequences in a positive and negative way for a lot of these things. We saw it happen with the stolen bases, the increase, and of course that was the intention, but there's other things of how it affects the game. And I think we will only see that as we roll this out for a full 162. I also like the fact that you keep the human element, as you mentioned. The goal is to get the call right always, but I think it's important for us to review the biggest missed calls. And I think with the pitcher, the catcher, the hitter immediately being able, as you mentioned, tap their cap or tap their helmet and having a Hawkeye system similar to tennis, tracking the pitch and getting it right. And they can confirm or overturn the call. And what they're saying, 13 to 14 seconds based on what we had from spring training and the other places that they were testing this out. And if you look at just the overall consensus of fans, I think a big piece of this a couple of years ago, and I understand the fan base, you're looking to appease a lot of the fans out there. And I think every fan base has been burned by a bad call at some point where you get frustrated, you lose a game, and all these games matter. We're watching it come down literally to game 162 for a lot of these teams. And you can lose games based on missed calls in a big spot. At spring training this year, 72% of surveyed fans said the challenge system improved their experience, and nearly 70% said they want MLB to move forward with it. And in the minors, games with full ABS tended to drag with more walks and slower pace. And just to keep that in mind, because I understand that pace of play is a huge thing with Rob Manfred. And some other nuggets of info about this. During spring training, players challenged 2.6% of all called pitches, and about 52% of challenges were successful. You mentioned some of the defensive players. Pitchers and catchers were slightly more accurate, 54%, than hitters that were at 50%. You mentioned Spencer Jones has a different eye of the plate, but the success rates dipped later in the games, falling from about 60% early innings to under 50% by the ninth. So, and as you mentioned, I think the big piece of this is the strike zone will be defined to be a bit tighter than what the umpires often call. It's 17 inches wide, 8.5 inches deep, with the top set at 53.5% of a player's height and the bottom at 27%. So what does that all mean? I think the players have to be measured in spring to lock in zone accuracy using the manual, the biomechanical testing, all the things. These are big pieces to this. It's not just going to be, hey, get the camera on and figure out if it's a ball or strike. There's a lot of science behind this, and I'm happy that MLB is moving forward with it. I don't think it takes us out of the woods for full robo-umps. I think this is microdosing it. I think eventually we will have the full-on situation with that. But for right now, we're going to get the calls right in the big moments. So I don't think it's going to replace the umpires for a couple years. It's, like I said, microdosing in the immediate. But I think it's going to give teams a real chance to overturn those missed ball and strike calls. And it's a compromise. Old school fans, the new age fans, tradition, technology, and it's going to be part of MLB pretty quickly. And I think people are going to get used to it.
Yeah, I hope you're wrong about that, and I hope this is just what is here to stay, and we don't go full robo. But that's a conversation for another day. I mean, to touch on what you're saying about the strike zone, gone are the days of Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, Livan Hernandez getting 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 inches off the plate. Not going to happen anymore. So that leads you to think, all right, this is going to be advantageous for the hitters. They can zone in more, right? They can really look for certain pitches, and maybe we see offense go up. But to be honest, the strike zone already has been pretty tight, just inconsistent. I mean, those days, like I said a minute ago, those days of Greg Maddux getting inches off the plate, let's be honest, those have been gone for a little while. This just makes it even more, feel even further in the past. I think there might be moments that it actually helps the pitcher. Obviously, if they throw a strike and it's called a ball, it helps them in that case. But one thing I think is you might see some high breaking balls that the hitter doesn't want anything to do with get called a strike more or become a strike. And then you might see pitchers throw those more often. I think one thing you notice for a lot of years is sometimes the higher end of the strike zone is just not called. I mean, we're always taught like chest, like letters, right? Letters on the chest to knees. And I feel like sometimes it's a little lower than that at the major league level. I know a few years back, I remember Jacob deGrom was part of this fad where the high fastball became in vogue again because it started getting called. But now it's not going to be a year-to-year thing where like, oh, this pitch is getting called a lot this year. Oh, 2 years later, this pitch is getting called this year. You got to watch out for that. It's just going to be consistent, which I think is a good thing, much to the chagrin of Walker Buehler, who wants more strike calls as a veteran. It's not going to happen. All right. The other thing I will say, the interesting part of this, another interesting part is with the managers not having control of this and somebody that they can call to tell them if they should challenge it, not having a part of it. I wonder if that causes some issues every once in a while. Like, are there going to be strategies put in? Like, are there going to be strategies put in place by managers? Like, hey, you don't challenge a call if this is the situation, right? Like, I don't know if they're going to get that specific. Like, if it's this inning and this is going on, you've already used a challenge, don't use it. And then if there's a player who uses them a couple times out of reaction, because here's the thing, if you watch the system we have in place right now with challenges on the base paths and home runs and things like that, what do you notice? Almost like an NBA player thinks they're fouled every single time they miss a layup. Every single time someone's throwing out on the base paths, you see them like look up and point to the dugout. And I'd say only about 10% of the time do they actually go through a challenge because they look and they're like, no, you were out. So you can't have that in the strike and ball situation. You can't just be super reactionary where you're like, no way. You kind of, I know you have to be quick, but yeah, it's going to cause problems if you're that guy on the team that is wasting challenges. And you could see maybe some issues between managers and players for that. So that's something to watch for. But overall, I think the majority of fans and I think the majority of players are going to be big fans of this.
Yeah, I think the challenge format keeps the flow of the game intact while they're still going to correct the most impactful misses. But I think, as you mentioned before, I think there will be some alterations to this, maybe even the middle of 2026, where maybe at the All-Star game, they'll have a conversation, because I think that will be an issue. I think it should come from the dugout in some way. They can't have situations like Spencer Jones tapping his helmet when he's wrong. And I guess maybe that's more of a case of getting things and working out the circuits and the bugs out of this, because when you have a situation with the joint competition committee getting together, they have to figure out a way that it would be best served for baseball. And there is a selfish nature to players innately where, like we meant, and we keep going back to the Spencer Jones call, but there's so many of them where you watch your favorite players and they sit there and say, that was a ball, it wasn't a strike. And then you watch the replay on the TV. And it, obviously, if you had a few seconds to watch the iPad, you could see that it actually was a called strike correctly. It's going to be challenging. Like you mentioned, there will be some pushback between the manager and the player that goes with it. And the fact that you have a limited amount that you have to be able to use in strategic ways and don't want to waste them early in low leverage spots. That's too much autonomy on the players. That to me, that will have to change down the line. Obviously, this is going to have to be worked out, but it would not shock me to see, first of all, as I mentioned, to go full ABS. Like, I don't think we're away from that. And I think eventually we will be at a spot where it has to come from the dugout like other challenges. Why would you allow the players to challenge? That seems like an oversight that needs to get corrected.
I disagree. I like it. Like, know the strike zone. You're a professional ball player. We don't need to slow the game down, right? The whole point of a lot of these things over the years has been to speed it up. So if you keep on doing these more and more and more from the dugout, you do slow it down a bit, which goes against so much of what you said you wanted to do. I like it, man. And eventually there's going to be statistics out there like, hey, this guy in 2026 got 93% of his strike challenges correct at the bat. Like Juan Soto, does he really have that good of a strike zone knowledge? We'll see when this comes out, things like that. Or this guy made 15 challenges of strikes and only got 3 of them right. Like, this manager's never going to let him challenge again. I like the individual having to do it and having to be super quick. I just think it's another kind of nuance of the game and something to look at and something that could increase or decrease a player's value. And it keeps the game moving while getting things correct.
Now, it's a fair point for sure. It does add that different layer. I just think right now we're gatekeeping the inevitable. You're already let in the zombies out of the gate. They're coming towards you. eventually we will have, whether it's pitch comm in the umpire's ear, to have the illusion that they're the ones calling the pitches, balls and strikes. I think that's what it will be by 2028, let's just say. And it might be part of the negotiating agreement for Players Association and for the owners to get in the table and say, this is what we want. We're microdosing this to make fans used to it, because baseball fans love tradition, so that you can't do it all at once. And you have to do these small pieces. And the man for man to me is still the most egregious thing that they just push forward no matter what. And I understand it was a shortened season. Everyone just was happy to get baseball in 2020, but wild stuff that still exists today. That I don't know. It blows my mind that man for man still exists.
It is interesting. I hated that when it came out, and I've actually gotten used to it, and I don't mind it. I'll just say one quick story of what I heard during a Mets broadcast the other day, and then I'll let you get to your opening say. Gary Cohen was somehow they were talking about like the top 5 inventions of all time. You know how they go off on tangents, but it was related to baseball. And he said, number 1, fire. If you want to count that as an invention, I guess it is really a long time ago. And he goes, number 2, pitch clock. And I get it, like guys in the booth that are calling games like that to keep it moving. Although I think for veterans like Gary Cohen, I do think there was an adjustment at first of like such little time. Like it can't always be a big storytelling fest like it used to be in baseball. Like you have to keep it moving. Once they got used to it, I think most announcers are probably huge fans of it. Like you're not punching the clock as long. But then he went on to say, he's like, honestly, it's not necessarily all about the length of the game. It's that the game keeps on moving. And he said he'd be completely willing. Like he'd be fine if they got rid of the Manfred rule and you have the occasional 15, 16 inning game. He just hated the games that were a 9 inning regular game that were taking like 4 hours. So that's an interesting point to look at. I'm kind of indifferent about the Manfred rule. I think I'd be okay either way. But yeah, I mean, lots of changes in baseball over the last several years. I think most positive, but it still seems like we're moving in a place where each year there could be something new and different, and got to get used to it. Players too.
Yeah. Just to be clear, the man for man, I'm not so far against. It is interesting to me to see such a drastic change get completely overhauled. And the one thing I will say, really comparing to the NHL shootout, because I think that's the closest comparison where you're having regular season games be decided on something that isn't part of the postseason situation. But again, you can talk about the NFL, different rules in the postseason for a very long time that they had in the regular season. That is a big piece to what happens in sports. And if you really want to pull the thread on our extra inning game, you go 14 innings and you have a position player pitching, and that's how the game ends. That is not how a game in the postseason would end either. So the goal is to save bullpens, eventually saving arms and saving careers, and all those things play a part. But we will definitely talk more about that as we continue to go down the line. It's going to be here before you know it, but we're going to be talking here for my opening say about the Tampa Bay Rays. And MLB owners voted unanimously to approve the sale of the aforementioned Tampa Bay Rays, officially moving the team from Stu Sternberg's group to a new ownership group led by a real estate developer, Patrick Zalewski. And this transfer is expected to close within the next 2 weeks. Of course, we can eulogize Sternberg's conversation about being in charge from 2005. He took over from Vince Naomi, who was the rebranded the franchise from the Devil Rays, etc. We did have a good conversation about the Rays as the Yankees just walked off here, which is Jose Caballero. So thank God the Yankees won.
Big
Come
win.
from behind the win. The bullpen of the White Sox is just atrocious. That's why the White Sox are who they are. Yankees won a game they're supposed to. But obviously the ballpark issues, Sternberg is going to be kind of discussed with this during his tenure. In March, the Rays backed out of that $1.3 billion plan to build a new stadium next to Tropicana Field after the hurricane, and delays drove the cost up. That failed effort was really the latest of the ballpark proposals that never really happened. Al Lang Stadium in St. Pete back in 2007. You can go with the Yarb City one in Tampa in 2018. And most recently, that Trop adjacent site back in 2023. Rob Manfred said he expects Zalewski's group to start fresh on another stadium in search, and they want to do it in the St. Pete area. So that's a big piece to this team. We had conversations about this with Ryan Bass about the Tampa Bay Rays, and obviously he's an employee of the team. But there was concerns that this team could have been relocated, not only because of the situation with Tropicana Field, the situation with the fans not showing up, and there's this threat, these cities that are looming out there that want these franchises. Of course, expansion exists, but there's also teams. If you're not showing up to support your team, there might be a chance that your team could be moved. We even had the conversation about Montreal. I think the fact that we have a new ownership group in place, if they get the stadium in place, you can lock Tampa Bay to be there for a very long time. Obviously, the Hurricane Milton stuff last October, that's an act of God. That's something that came out of nowhere. You could not plan for that. And the Steinbrenner Field, in Tampa was a lifesaver. They did post on social media, and it's on the side of the stadium about, welcoming the ownership. And it says, thank you to the Yankees because of Steinbrenner Field and what they were able to do. I think essentially the Yankees have kept the Rays where they are and built that bridge, that lily pad to keep them in place, because this could have been a disaster. And what we're seeing there, we're seeing, everyone had the conversations about the rain delays. We've only had 17 rain delays across a couple of these games. They've only lost 18 hours lost to weather. I think people had a big, Florida is unpredictable. It rains. People that live there understand that. They've played well at home, 41-40, and winning record there. Going to the Zalewski stuff, the stadium chase is going to be huge. If you lock up the stadium and you have them staying in Tampa, you can breathe easy and start to change the formula of this small market team that they've been known for and figure out these questions and put them in place. It's a big thing. And I think what we're seeing with Miami and the fact that Oakland's moving to Vegas, the fact that you have a stadium, that will be the first step to securing this. And the first step is having an owner that wants to keep him in Tampa.
Yeah, and my hope is just that everyone is on the up and up with this, and that everything we've heard about keeping them in the Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area is completely true, and not like a as long as this happens kind of thing, and then it doesn't, and they look elsewhere. Because it's been messy there for a little while between the new stadium falling through, and then the hurricane ripping the roof off of the current stadium. I do feel like it's worked out for the best in the end, which I don't know if we all could have foreseen. I feel like when we were talking about this last year, we're like, this is looking really bad in a lot of different ways. And now, successful season as far as Steinbrenner Field for them. Obviously they're missing the playoffs, but I feel like having that home was a good thing for them. Staying in Tampa was a good thing for them. Because again, if they had played somewhere else this year, you never know if that ends up being their permanent home. Like we've seen something like that before in other sports. So I think it all worked out. And honestly, this conversation, a lot remains to be seen. I do think it's very intriguing that new ownership, new money, maybe they do end up spending more. And sometimes you think they're definitely going to spend more. But like, I'll point to the Baltimore Orioles. We kind of expected their new ownership the way they came in, and we knew they had money, the group of people that was involved in that. We expected them to come in and really spend. And we haven't seen that yet. Apparently they did offer Corbin Burns a nice contract that he turned down and went to Arizona instead. But we still haven't seen them spend money. So it's not always a guarantee like, oh, new ownership, we're finally going to spend. But that's the hope. It would be cool to see a team like Tampa be able to throw a little money around from time to time.
Yeah, and I think the success we've seen hasn't been the problem. They've been competitive on the field at every step. I understand this might be a lost season. They're going to finish close to 500. But under Sternberg, they've had constant success. 2 World Series trips, 9 winning seasons in a row. Those are things that you can lean on, and they were not really invested in. They were making the best out of having the bare minimum. So imagine you have an ownership coming in, and think about what Steve Cohen has done for the Mets, coming in and stabilizing it and being able to infuse even just 10% more into the payroll. It'd be the lifeblood of this Tampa team that has made the best of so many situations. So happy for the fans out there, happy for the fans in Tampa and Florida area. They're a team that deserves this, because this is a team that has been successful over and over again, despite a lot of things that got in their way.
Yeah, what my hope would be, even if they don't go and sign huge free agents, if they could just keep some of their guys instead of being like, all right, we can hold on to this guy until he's due a new contract and trade him the year before he becomes a free agent. Like, a Rosarena gets traded. Tyler Glasnow, who I know was in the Pirates organization, I believe, first, but he gets traded before they have to pay him even more money. Like things like that. You want to see them be able to hold on to their higher profile players that did come through their system, because we know they're pretty damn good at developing their own guys. Like we want to see Junior Caminero stay in a Tampa Bay uniform for a long, long time. And if the new ownership comes in and makes that happen, that'd be cool. Is Caminero, before we move on, maybe we need to fact check that. Was Caminero one of the young guys that did get an extension? I know there were so many of those in the past year or so. Or is he still kind of...
I believe Caminero did get an extension early. I'll look it up for you quick over here. But I agree with you, man. I think that's a big piece here is you don't want them to change the identity of who they are, because a lot of these teams, the identity has been developing their own players, and then they have to be released out into the wild because they can't afford them. But without a salary cap in place, at least for the current moment, without the new negotiating agreement in place, this is a team that has shown an ability to develop, and even its front office. I mean, go to Andrew Friedman as well. Like, they develop their guys from on the field, the executives, they are a breeding ground of success. And the only thing that has been really stopping them has been the lack of security from the outside, the ownership and the lack of stadium. And if they, I understand they want to keep in the St. Pete area, but being that we've been out over there, Devin, you and I did the ballpark tour over there, just how far removed they are from Tampa, and people that live over there talk about the bridge and the traffic and all that. If they could be in Tampa proper like they are this year, and I understand they're down in attendance, but that's only because of the capacity of Steinbrenner Field. I think that a lot of people are happy with the experience out there, enjoying a ball game outside. Being in downtown Tampa is a completely different feel than being in St. Petersburg. That's a big piece to what the success is. And if you can find a way to get them in that area, it'd be a huge deal.
And just to follow up on my question a minute ago, Caminero, I see an August 10th article that says Rays have not discussed extension with Junior Caminero. Obviously, I don't think there's been any updates since then. So what I was going to say, if the new ownership comes in and gets that, like one of their first moves is getting that done, I mean, you get the city,
the good grace
on your side really quickly. Yeah,
for sure. Well, let's dive into the meat of the order and talk about the rest of the news around baseball.
We have the meat.
All right. Well, thank you to Arby's for the soundbite. We're going to be talking about Devin's New York Mets, and it's a big week for them. We mentioned in the opening of this show, we're on the precipice of maybe not the worst collapse in team's history. Unfortunately, there is a franchise that potentially could be considered cursed if you believe in that sort of thing. But you wanted to have a conversation therapeutically, maybe cathartically, rating who is most responsible for the Mets' underperformance over the course of, at this point, the last 3.5 months of underwhelming baseball. So I'll let you take the lead on this. This is your team. I know you watch them on a nightly basis. What is most responsible? And then keep in mind, guys, we're rating it out of 10, a scale 1 to 10, 10 being they're the most responsible, 1 really not being responsible at all.
All right. So we're going to break this down into 5 facets. Offense, and I don't know, this might be a different order than you had it, but we'll stay with each other here. Offense, Carlos Mendoza, the pitching, clubhouse, and David Stearns, the general manager. All right, I'm going to start with the offense. I rated this a 3 out of 10 as far as being the reason for their underperformance. So not very high. If you look, I could talk about this for a long time and go down the list, but just in general, you have a few guys that are having great seasons that any other team would say, all right, come over here, we'll take that. Juan Soto, historical season in his first year as Met, even though he got off to a slow start. Lindor, pretty much a Francisco Lindor season. He has highs and lows. He goes into slumps for sure. He's been a slow starter almost every single year, but the numbers are there at the end of the year. Around a 30-30 guy, give or take, almost every single year. Pete Alonso's been great. When he's going bad, he looks really bad. And that makes people think that he's actually doing worse than he is. He's chasing pitches that are nowhere close, things like that. But man, he's been clutch. He's hit some big home runs. He's been great with runners on and in high leverage situations. He's had a great season. Brandon Nimmo, who had an enormous home run in this game that is still tied 7-7 now. Again, he's another guy. When he's going bad, it's a pretty deep hole. But overall, very good season. His most power he's ever shown. Not a natural fit in the lineup as far as like they have him in the 5-hole a lot, places like that, even cleanup sometimes. So it's not great, but he's made it work. And you could keep on going. Jeff McNeil has looked a little more like Jeff McNeil this season. Brett Beatty, I know people like to pile on him and say he's not what we thought he was. Go look at the projections, what the projections were for Brett Beatty before the year. Any projection you want. Look at any of the projections. There's a lot of them. He's way above them. Mark Vientos has had a bad sophomore season, but kind of a predictable sophomore slump. So we could go on and on and on. I just don't think the offense, I know there's moments like you can't lose to the Nationals 3-2 the other day in a big game now against one of the worst pitching ERAs in the league. So I'm not saying they hold zero responsibility, but if we're trying to rate these and rank these, I think they're almost at the bottom of the list of who's responsible. They're a good offensive team. They just are. They are a good offensive team.
Yeah, I completely agree. I gave them a 2 out of 10 as far as responsibility because of those spells that we've seen inconsistently at some points, but this lineup is good enough to win a World Series. Juan Soto has been MVP caliber. Pete Alonso sits at his typical power mark. The OPS is there. Lindor having moments for sure all around. At some point, if you do the math here, I think they have 8 hitters producing an OPS plus of 109 or better. Like there is a real case you can make that this offense is a championship constructed lineup. It just, for whatever reason, has not clicked in big moments. And when you look at the stat line, we were talking about this in our chat, and I understand Juan Soto made an error on a misplay in the outfield, and people will make all those clips about it that are ragging on Juan Soto. Defensively, he's been better than last year. If you look at the advanced statistics, it's been there. And offensively, you can make the case that this season for Soto has been better than last year. I understand people will look at that season batting near Judge, looking at the big hit against Cleveland to get the Yankees to the World Series. But if you look at just the player that Soto is this year with the home runs, now he's added speed to a dimension of his game that he usually doesn't have. He's stealing bases. He's hitting clutch. He has been as advertised offensively. You cannot put the blame on Juan Soto. Really can't put the blame on the offense. You just can't. They're not responsible for this. And we will talk about who is responsible because there is a main culprit here.
And a word you used, inconsistent, I agree with. But honestly, 162 games a year, I think if you go poll fans of all 30 teams and ask them, choose 5 words to describe your offense, I think a whole hell of a lot of them are going to use the word inconsistent.
It's fair.
I think that's just baseball over 162 games. If you watch your team day in, day out, there's going to be times like this team is so damn inconsistent. Francisco Alvarez, as we speak, 2-run homer, 9-7 Mets. What a huge homer. I'm going to try to stay on track. There's the offense. Yeah, I don't think it's the offense. And a lot of people try to say they're not clutch. And I think that comes from our struggle to come back when we're down late in games. We just have not been able to do it all year. It's like 0-60 something trailing after 7 or 8 innings. It's crazy. We thought we had one the other night and we didn't. But their batting average in high leverage situations this year is 273 as a team. Like that's good. So the numbers don't add up to blame the offense. I'm going to get off that one because we still have 4 other facets here. Let's go to Carlos Mendoza. Okay. I'm going to try to keep this one short because I think it's simple. I certainly do not agree with every move he's made this year. There's been some glaring ones where it's like, the other night, Edwin Diaz throws 7 pitches in a game that goes to extra innings, and then they take him out. He doesn't start the next inning. And after the game, he just said, well, before the game, we knew he was limited to 1 inning. Make an adjustment, man. Like it's 7 pitches. It's do or die time. You can make an adjustment there. And usually I like Mendoza because he doesn't stay in those defined lines sometimes as much as other managers do. So he hasn't had a great year. I will give him that. There's been moments, head scratchers. But tell me this, how does a guy go from rising managerial star, and we heard that term about Carlos Mendoza a lot of times last year, to he should be fired? I think that's reactionary. It's people that just want blood, want somebody to blame. And who are you going to get? We've talked about this in the Aaron Boone conversation a million times. Tell me, what guy out there is going to come in as the manager and add wins to our win total? So 2 out of 10 on the blame for Mendoza.
Yeah, I'm giving Mendoza a 5 out of 10. I think he's really handled a chaotic roster reasonably well because some of the decisions we've seen, and if you go back to some of the losing streaks in July, the Mets were leaning on the bullpen games, if you remember that point, and Paul Blackburn, who's no longer on the team, was, responsible for losses here. And they got a sweep against the Orioles, the loss to the Yankees where Waddle put them in a 5-0 hole. Not all on Mendoza, of course, but his bullpen management and reliance on certain arms, I think he was insistent. We've seen it across a lot of teams. If you're watching, and I'm certainly critical of Aaron Boone, that just believes you can get these players right by just throwing them in high leverage situations. But on the other hand, I want to give him a lot of credit. He's kept his clubhouse from fracturing. They had a really bad stretch of games. We mentioned the pieces the numbers were pretty bad. The offense vanished for long stretches. You had the 8-game losing streak in September where they only scored 24 runs. No one was pointing fingers at each other saying it's his fault, it's their fault. Everyone said the right thing. And even over the weekend against the last place Nationals, they only scored 5 total runs in back-to-back losses. It's easy to say, pointing fingers and say, it's Mendoza's situation. He said it wrong. We watched the same thing with Rob Thompson and Nick Castellanos, and they're a winning team. True. Castellanos is not happy with the way he's being handled. And Mendoza's kept everyone in line here. And you got to give him a lot of credit for that, because this could be certainly a situation where people are unhappy and want a scapegoat, because just as much as the fan base want a scapegoat, I'm sure the lineup does as well. Because offensively, if you have Soto hitting home runs, he can't be happy that they're putting him in a 5-0 hole where him having 3 RBIs in a game is not enough to win. So I give Mendoza a lot of credit here. And I think that really leans on what you were saying before. Who are you getting? Who's the heir apparent to Mendoza?
Right.
Give him a shot, because as quickly as everybody turned on him, they just want to put a head on a spike. That's what they want at this point. You don't want to just do that to appease fans. And we watch Aaron Boone do it. I was critical of Aaron Boone, saying he should be fired, but it goes through cycles. We have to let it be. I give him a 5 out of 10 because there has been decisions he's made that are questionable, but it's not his fault. He's only given the team that he's been given.
Agreed, 100%. I mean, there's probably still some Mets fans out there that want Wally Backman as the manager. It's been like 25 years. Like, why can't we hire Wally Backman because he's fiery? Like, as if it's that simple. Okay. You mentioned clubhouse and Mendoza keeping the clubhouse together. So let's go to clubhouse as the third facet here. This one I have is very interesting to me because you're right. We haven't seen finger pointing, which is a good sign. I have gotten to the point where I feel like there might be something there, but I have nothing concrete. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. And I just because I feel like there might be something. I posted on Twitter today something along the lines of like, hey, are we a week away from getting like an article in The Athletic talking about a rift in the Mets clubhouse? Something like that. Maybe Joel Sherman comes out in his podcast and talks to John Heyman about it. I don't know. They actually asked Howie Rose about it today, and Howie Rose, he was their guest. He didn't blow it off, but he said something kind of similar to what I just said. Like, there's nothing he can speak of that there is that, but he said, it could be an example of like, there isn't that rah guy this year that can really bring them up when they need it. Jose Iglesias, I've talked about him before. Nick Castellanos in the offseason said he should be the MVP for what he did to that team, which I thought was amazing coming from an enemy clubhouse guy, right? He hasn't been here, and people talked like the second he came in the clubhouse last year, he was just like a lightning rod for a lot of different reasons, kept guys up. Obviously, all the OMG stuff, incredible vibes. JD Martinez is another guy, not a rah-rah guy, but a guy who I think is just a natural leader, and he's been there, done that. Neither of those guys are in there. There was all this talk about Francisco Lindor maybe being named captain, maybe at the David Wright number retirement ceremony. Didn't happen. A few weeks later after that, there was this interesting quote from Juan Soto after Starling Marte had a big, I think, walk-off hit. And he said something along the lines of like, everyone in the locker room knows like he's I don't know if he used the word captain, but something like that. Like we all look at him. And I think it was probably innocent, but there's that part of you like, is there like a little divide of like who the leader is? Because I think for the last couple of years, we've thought Nimmo and Lindor are the leaders. Pete, even though he's a big presence, doesn't really want to be that guy. He can be a rah-rah every once in a while, but doesn't want to be the leader, the guy that kind of speaks up. So I do wonder if there's a little bit of a rift. There used to be this rumor that there was like, this is before Soto, there used to be a rumor there's Lindor's guys and then like Alonso's guys. And it almost had these like racial undertones of like the white dudes and the Latino dudes. I don't know. There was one moment, Jeff McNeil does like a charity thing every year. He had his event out at Top Golf. And I remember Pete Alonso was like the only dude that showed up. Now this past year, I think he did it again, but at Citi Field, and like a lot of people showed up. So maybe it was just location, but there's little things. We can go back to Lindor's first year when he and McNeil had the dust up in the tunnel. And it was like this raccoon thing they made up, right? New York fans know. If you don't, I'm sure you can look that one up. Ridiculous. But they definitely had some kind of fight, some kind of altercation. So I don't know if there's lingering stuff there. Maybe it's the lesser of the evils I'm talking about. It's just like they lack that guy that can get them up. But when I watch them, I certainly don't see a lack of passion. I mean, Francisco Alvarez just hits that 2-run homer to break a tie late in the game, and he stops halfway down the line and is just pumping his arms, right? I mean, Jesse Winker's been hurt all year, but he's been around the clubhouse from what I've seen. He's another guy that kind of rah-rah type. So I don't know. I'm giving it 4 out of 10 just because I think it's all guesswork at this time, but I'm not completely writing it off.
Yeah, I'm going with a 3 out of 10. As you mentioned, I don't think there's a sense that this team has quit. They've battled even in losing stretches. They've shown heart. They've shown passion. They've seen like they're invested in games where it'd be easy to hang your head. I think this group deserves a lot of credit for hanging around despite really and we'll talk about the culprit. I mean, the rotations collapse. That's been the issue. And I think it'd be easy to say, we're not going to win games. I'm going to put my head down. And we have not seen that. It is interesting that you're saying that about the glue guy situation, because I think a lot of these teams need the glue guy to keep them together. And some of these valuable players we see in postseason moments, we've discussed understated heroes. but sometimes it doesn't have to be a guy getting a big hit. It's keeping these guys entertained or distracted or together. And
Right.
whether it was Iglesias that was the guy doing that or it was somebody different, it's just interesting because I think there is a piece, and I understand, Divine Sports Gospel talks about, they have a shirt, vibes above replacement. That is a real tangible thing that analytics can't measure. And what Iglesias brought to that team last year, you mentioned the Castellanos piece, and I understand it was probably like he was saying he was the MVP, and no one can really make the case for that. But being close to the team and seeing what is supercharging them, whether it's the off the field stuff or galvanizing them. We've seen so many Tampa Bay Rays teams that are just, it feels like a brotherhood. They're showing up dressed in cowboy outfits, or those type of things go a really long way getting through stretches. But overall, it's hard to bond and vibe when you're losing at big clips like they are. So it's hard to judge because winning is the best deodorant of all. And it's hard to measure a team that they've done a lot of losing over the past 3.5 years. So you got to give them credit for being galvanized enough to stick together. But I mean, I think a lot of the New York media would be upset if this was a clubhouse that was partying despite losing all these games in a row. Like, how would you feel as a fan watching them playing music loud and being goofy in a post game after they lose to the last place Marlins in a big game that matters? I don't think that would make a lot of people feel good.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, so we're pretty much on the same page of that one. I think the biggest difference we had so far was Mendoza had 3 out of 10, or no, 2 out of 10. You had 5 out of 10, but otherwise we're pretty close here. Let's get to the pitching, and I want to talk about the pitching as a whole, the whole year, the starters and the bullpen. Right off the bat, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. I would go higher here, but if you look at the entire arc of the season, the first couple months of the year, they were the best pitching team in the majors, right along with the Padres. If you looked at Team ERA, they were great. And honestly, it was a great time for them to be great because Soto got off to a slow start. Lindor got off to an uneven start again. The only guy that was really consistent in the beginning of the year was Pete Alonso, who was on fire in the beginning of the year. But the starting rotation was great. Kodai Senga had a 2 ERA and under for a long, long time. David Peterson, a big reason he was an all-star is because his first few months, like, there were a lot of good things, and you can't just write that off because it's been a while. So that's why I'm not going as high as like 10 or 9. It's a 7 out of 10. The bullpen was supposed to be a strength for them this year. And at the beginning of the year, it was. AJ Minter was looking like a great signing. Max Kranick was looking like a great weapon who could kind of give you length out of the bullpen sometimes if you needed it. They got destroyed by injuries. Destroyed. And that's no one's fault. Okay. The other reason I'm taking a couple points off here and not going super high is because recently there's been a little bit of a jolt in the arm with these 3 young guys, Nolan McLean, Jonah Tong, Brandon Sproat, and especially McLean, who has shown some good things that can help revive this rotation. Some of them have given some length as well, especially McLean, which is nice to see. But the reality of it is that it's obviously gone south for a while. First half, one of the best pitching teams in the league. Second half, 27th, 28th, 29th in all different rankings on the pitching side of things. Going deep into games has been an issue for them all year, which has then taxed the bullpen as well. I think they've used more pitchers than any team in history as of like the other day, as far as pitchers appearing on the major league team. They've DFA'd guys like every day to get a new arm in here. It's been madness, actual madness. And Peterson's poor second half. Kodai Senga just falling off completely after he got hurt, tried to come back, has not been able to find it. Sean Manaea, we were glad to see him back. He's shown spurts, but just still hasn't really found himself. Clay Holmes has been fine. But again, coming off a guy that was a reliever for a long time, struggled to give length, still trying to figure that out. So a 7 out of 10, I think on the field, it is clearly the biggest reason they are losing on the field. 7 out of 10 for me for the pitching.
I'm going with 8 out of 10. I think this is the clearest culprit. The Mets obviously built their rotation on paper. They watched it crumble. You already discussed the injuries to Montas and Canning and McGill, and David Peterson's fate has been brutal. So we don't have to get into that. The Clay Holmes stat is interesting as well. Since June 7th, he's completed more than 5 innings in only 3 of 16 starts. So you pull the thread on that, the domino effect, leaving the staff exposed, that forces them to lean on the rookies. And I think the numbers tell the story. They've been largely non-competitive down the stretch when they weren't winning, and the bullpen workload has skyrocketed. And I think that's all tied together. So the rotation was shaky going in, and we will discuss another culprit here, but it collapsed entirely. And all the things that went well last year, where anything that Stearns felt like he touched and brought it to the table, it went completely the other way. Maybe it changes his approach coming this offseason. I largely echo everything you said. I don't want to get into all the numbers because we all know them at this point. And the Sean Manaea pitching through loose bodies in his elbow, we know all the numbers at this point. We've been covering it pretty extensively at this point. They have to figure this out. And if they're going to be competitive in October, if they are lucky enough to get there and sustain and figure out a way to survive, they're leaning on 3 rookies, Sproat, Tong, and McLean. That's not how you draw it up in the offseason. It's not a World Series contender with the highest payroll in baseball. You should not be leaning on 3 rookies to carry across the finish line. Something has to change in the offseason.
Yeah, and then that transitions us into the last piece, David Stearns, front office. Okay. You judge a GM for the most part on 2 things, what happens in the offseason and what happens at the trade deadline. So we're going to talk about both of them. Some questionable decisions. Obviously, they signed Juan Soto in the offseason, but I've said this before. That's probably more about Steve Cohen's money and what he could show Soto than it is Stearns. Stearns probably talking about the players they had in the system and all that stuff probably helped. But so I'm not going to give him 0 credit on that. But we got to put the Soto thing aside because you still have to build a team. There were some questionable decisions, and I'm not saying hindsight. I'm saying like when they happened, a lot of Met fans were like, what? Number 1, Frankie Montas, $17 million this year and next year. Weird. Just weird. That money probably could have gone somewhere else. Garrett Crochet was available for trade. We had the pieces to get him, and we didn't. And look what he has done for the Boston Red Sox. Imagine Garrett Crochet on the New York Mets right now. I mean, we surely would not still be fighting for a playoff spot. I think we would have clinched already. Now, there's probably a lot of teams that could say that, like, why didn't we get Garrett Crochet? So I'm not making it sound like it's that easy, but looking at that, it leaves a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. The rotation never felt like it matched the star power of the offense. If you're going to give Soto $700-something million, you better have a rotation that feels like, oh yeah, that goes along with it. So, I said that when it happened too. Like, you need to build a winner every single year as long as Soto is here being paid that money. There's no punting any season. So I thought from the get-go, the rotation just looked like it lacked what it really needed to be a true competitor, especially when you're in a division with the Phillies, who have just an unbelievable rotation. Most fans, if we want to talk about the deadline, I'll say one more thing about the product in the field. Center field from the get-go has been a mess. Traded for Jose Siri, still had Tyrone Taylor. McNeil has now factored in. Looking back on that, like, you got to do better in center field. You got to do better in center field. Most Met fans were excited by the trade deadline. Like, we cannot lie and say, like, oh, well, shit, trade deadline. Everyone was pretty damn excited, riding high. Thought we were going to have a monster bullpen again. It hasn't worked out. People haven't played up to their potential. Cedric Mullins has been absolutely horrible. Ryan Helsley has just completely lost it. Hopefully he finds it, but has completely lost it. Rodgers has been fine, but so it's not all bad. But we look at like Harrison Bader and Yohan Duran for the Phillies, how great they've been helping them clinch that division, and then what our guys have done. It's made a big difference. So all in all, I think this lays at the feet of David Stearns. 9 out of 10. I think it's his fault. If I'm going to label one of these facets as it's their fault, I think Stearns is above the pitching.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you. And when you were talking about the offense and the pitching not matching each other, I was thinking about that meme usually used for Game of Thrones when the first couple seasons is really articulate horse that they're drawing, and the end is just like as if a kindergarten drew it. That's what it was. That's the offense. You're putting in a masterclass of finding a way to put this team together, and then you roll out a gamble for the rotation. Everybody knew that going in. A staff full of question marks, health concerns, and then eventually you had innings limits that you figure out. I mean, Clay Holmes is brought in as a starter, coming as a reliever. You had to know that wasn't going to be full tilt. He's going to be a guy we can lean on all year. And for all things accountable, Clay Holmes hasn't been the problem. That's the worst case scenario that we're here. And so when it blew up, as you mentioned, I don't think he bought enough in July, and it's easy for us to have hindsight and say it has not worked out because I don't think anyone expected Ryan Helsley to be as bad as he's been. Tyler Rogers and Gregory Soto adding the bullpen depth. Mullins has really not been the offensive upgrade you wanted, and he is an aging player. So of course, like, you were taking a risk. It wasn't like they gave up the farm for him. Obviously, cost was sky high, and most of the impact arms did not move in the first place. But I think there was a lack of urgency. And you can also point to Stearns being held accountable. Nolan McLean was dominating at AAA, and they were relying on bullpen games at that point when he was still dominant. He was ready to come up. And it's easy to have hindsight because he has been ready, and you don't want to bring a guy up too early. But these are things that front office needs to be held accountable for. I also go 9 out of 10. I think this lack of urgency addressing the rotation stands out most above all. But this team construction leaves a lot to be desired, especially when you spend that money on Juan Soto. This is a World Series or bust year, whether the Mets like it or not. That's where they stand. And David Stearns is a guy who has to be held accountable. I'm not saying fire him, but there needs to be a conversation in the offseason of, like, the way we drew this up, even if they get to October and say they get back to the NLCS, the way this went down this year cannot happen again. Because if they get to where they're going to go, it's not because Stearns constructed this team. It would be an act of God or magic that got them there. So you don't want to rely on that, especially when you're spending all that money on this team being constructed.
Yeah, and I will say, I do think there is a degree of bad luck here. I do think there is a degree of, like, that's baseball, Susan, here. Like, if you look at the analytics, especially offensively, everything you look at makes it seem like the Mets should easily be a playoff team based on where they fall. There was a graphic I looked at earlier, and this is WAR by team. So total WAR by team. The Mets are 5th at 44.6. Only Milwaukee, the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the Phillies are above them. Cincinnati, who they're trying to, now beat, they're down at 17th, 30.3. And that's just one. And I know people will say, oh, who cares? And I guess you're right. Who cares? Because that doesn't matter. Record matters. But that's just one example. There are a lot more examples of looking at the numbers and the analytics and just being like, how is this team fighting the Cincinnati Reds and the Arizona Diamondbacks for this last playoff spot? It's incredible. The only other thing, and then we'll move off this because we got to move to other things. This is going to be a long episode, folks. I think this is going to be, we might hit 2 hours today. I will say, I think a lot of people are already saying, like, preparing themselves, like, oh, if we miss the playoffs, like, you got to do something crazy. Like, you got to break it all down.
No,
I'm here to tell you, the team is not going to look that much different next year. We have big decisions to make on Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz, who are both going to opt out. I think Diaz will be back. The Alonso thing, I think, comes down to years. I similar to last year. I think if it's in, like, the 5-year realm, we'll get it done. I don't think AAV is that much of a problem for Steve Cohen. I think if it's longer than that and another team comes along and says, we'll give you 7, I don't think he's going to be a Met, to be quite honest. If Pete leaves, all right, probably Vientos, maybe Ryan Clifford, who's in AAA, looking pretty good, a mix of them at first base. Does that make us better, though, next year? No. I like those guys, but does it make us better next year than we are this year? No, Pete's been great. Let's be honest. Center field's been a mess. What's the recipe for that? I don't think it's a free agent. I think Carson Bench, who's also been a great minor league player for us, probably comes there. Maybe Jet Williams mixes in too. Maybe the two of them are involved there somehow. Does that make us better? Probably, but, like, you don't know what young players are going to come up and do right away, or if they're even going to start with the team right away. There's been rumors that Steve Cohen is enamored with the idea of signing Kyle Schwarber and putting him in a lineup with Juan Soto. I mean, I surely could get on board with that, but do I think it's going to happen? No. I think that's pie in the sky stuff, to be honest. So what I'm getting at here is there might be some changes here and there, but I think most of it will be like youth. And we don't know what that's going to turn into right away, as we've seen with Mark Vientos, Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, Luis Angel Acuna. So I'm just here to say, Met fans, like, don't expect something completely crazy and different, and we're going to go sign 5 big free agents. I just don't think that's the case.
So a good transition here is talking about what is a worse collapse. We talked a lot about the Mets, and on June 12th, the Mets were 45-24, the best record in baseball. Fangraphs had them at 96.2% chance of making the postseason. And since then, 35-52, the fourth worst record in baseball. Only the Nats, the Twins, and the Rockies have been worse. They've lost 11 of the last 15, including back-to-back last gut punches to the last place Nats. As we mentioned, Devin said it before. They're tied with the Reds for the last wild card. Cincinnati owns the tiebreaker, and obviously they won. They're winning, or did they win tonight against the Cubs?
The Mets have. Let me see this pitch. Okay, the Mets just won as we speak. Edwin Diaz strikes out Dansby Swanson to end the game. So big win for the Mets.
The D-backs play a part of this. They own a tiebreaker as well. So in reality, the Mets need to finish at least a game clear of both these teams. So we don't have to spend all the time talking about it. The Mets are tied to history, and I don't believe this is their worst collapse if they do collapse. I understand it's tied with a $300 million payroll. 2007, they blew a 7-game lead with 17 to play. 2008, they folded again on the final day. Those are scar-making moments for Met fans. So Met fans, they're callous to this thing. I want to talk about the Detroit Tigers here because I feel like this fall is different. And what we saw tonight just kind of speaks to how they've been losing games and how Cleveland's been winning. On July 8th, they were 54-34, leading Cleveland by 15 and a half games. So even as late as September 10th, they had a 9.5 game lead with 16 left. Since then, they've gone 7-18 over their last 25, 6 straight losses. Now it's 7, 9 of their last 10. Their bats have absolutely gone silent, only 2.5 runs per game. The rotation has cracked outside of Tarek Skubal, which they lost the game he started tonight. He's going to be the AL Cy Young here. Chris Paddock relegated to mop-up duty. Charlie Morton's gone. Now he has a retirement tour in Atlanta. Meanwhile, Cleveland's gone now at this point 16-2 in September, which flipped the division on its head. So if the Guardians do finish this off, it becomes the largest blown lead in MLB history, 15 and a half games bigger than the 1914 Braves miracle comeback or the 1964 Phillies infamous 6.5 game choke with 12 to play. It also outstrips the 1995 Angels, who squandered an 11-game lead, and will sit alongside the Cubs' Black Cat meltdown in 1969 and the Red Sox falling to Bucky Dent in 1978. Obviously, both collapses are awful, and there is a emotional attachment that you have to the Mets doing this, but I think the Tigers are historic. This Mets thing, yes, it is. It's been awful, but I think it speaks to just how bad the Tigers have been. The fact that you have a 15 and a half game lead erased, it's going to etch them into baseball history forever if they don't get out of this. Like, this will be remembered as you don't want to choke a lead away. 15 and a half games up at some point. This was supposed to be a laugh. This was supposed to be the first division that was locked and sealed and delivered going into October. We were talking about resting the Tigers, and now there's a chance they don't make it, and Cleveland walks in.
Yeah, you nailed it. So the question is which is the bigger collapse, I mean, they're both bad, but it is the Tigers. The Mets, and I think you said this, theirs has been this slow burn where it's like they lose 7 in a row, but then they recover, but then they have a really bad losing streak again, and this team is coming up, and then this team's they go back down. The Mets are fine. This team, it's just been a slow back and forth burn, whereas this Tigers thing is catastrophic. Like, it's all imploded. You mentioned the 15 and a half game lead from July. How about we could go even further? September 6th, just a couple weeks ago, they had a 10-game lead. It's unfathomable what has happened to the Tigers, and literally the opposite of what they did last year. Last year, they came out of nowhere, turned it on in the second half, and suddenly they're a playoff team, and they even win a playoff series. And then this year, they're cruising, like you said. It's the one division we probably talked the least about because it just seemed so uninteresting for a while because the Tigers were making it that way. And now Jose Ramirez and the boys are just reminding everybody they can do this. It's nuts. We should give some credit to Cleveland too, instead of just focusing on how bad it's been for Detroit. Detroit loses on Skubal Day tonight, which everything I was seeing this morning is it's Skubal Day. This is as must win of a game for a baseball team that is not a playoff game as it is. And honestly, the Tigers should count their lucky stars that the expanded playoffs exist because they have a fallback option. And the Houston Astros are right there, but the Astros also look a little bit dead in the water. So the Tigers might get saved and still get a playoff spot because of this. If they can't just beat Cleveland the next 2 times out themselves, they still might get saved here. But wow, I can't believe it. Like, I was starting to look at the standings and be like, oh man, like maybe. I didn't believe it was actually going to happen. And now Cleveland sits in first place with the tiebreaker over Detroit. It's nuts.
It's absolutely wild. And the fact that we're looking at Cleveland, who you can look at the Emmanuel Clase A thing, losing him to the gambling scandal, and you got Luis Ortiz leaving. All these pieces in place look like a lost season for Cleveland. And it's not like they're getting hot offensively. They're doing just enough to win. I think the pitching has been there. Gavin Williams has developed into an absolute ace at this point.
Yeah.
They found ways to get it done. They won today by scoring 5 runs, and the way it went down, if you go and watch the highlights of that the inning of how they scored those runs, it just kind of speaks to the unluckiness of the Tigers and how snake bitten they've been with the error from Skubal. It just like it unraveled for them. Putting a benchmark on this will be what everybody references when your team's about to collapse. They're going to measure it against the 2025 Tigers. And you hate to say that. The Eat 'em Up pod that we talk about, our good friends over there, they have to be devastated about what's going on. But this is a Detroit team that had high aspirations. And the one last thing I will say, there is a chance, and a lot of these teams can overcome for this, and these guys wake up the next day and they'll battle. This was a team, of course, house money last year. Let's remember that. This is a team that sold at the deadline. They got into the playoffs, and they were a magic run. There was expectations this year. There's a chance that this thing hangs around for a little bit and kind of upsets. Like, it has to be unsettling for them that they may make those reactionary decisions that you're saying that Met fans want for their team. If the Tigers do blow this lead completely and don't walk away with that AL Central division banner, they may just blow this up at the sake of it because they can't stand the sight of looking at the same team that blew this lead. Like that, there is a lot of domino effects, consequences that are unintended outside of just not making the playoffs. It is an absolute disaster, and it's unfathomable to be sitting here on September 23rd, like you mentioned, 10 games up 2 weeks ago. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I don't think they would blow it up even if they missed the playoffs, which is crazy. But like they have one of the best systems in place. I think it's their AAA team, the Erie Seawolves, who eventually will be the Erie Moon Mammoths, I think. Max Clark, Kevin McGonigal's there. I think Briseño is there as well. They're in the AAA championship, I believe, right now. And I mean, super talented guys that still can add to this team.
This kind of shit hangs around, though, man. It really does.
I know. No, but that leads me to saying how good their system is. Their deadline was a big dud. And again, this is not hindsight. We were calling this, and not only us, plenty of people were calling their deadline a dud. Charlie Morton, you mentioned, DFA'd for some reason back in Atlanta because they just love picking people up off of waivers.
He's going to retire as a Brave. That's it. He's going to say goodbye as a Brave.
The Braves just like to collect all these dudes. But so yeah, Charlie Morton, Chris Paddock, Kyle Finnegan, who actually was a really good pickup for them and then got hurt, was unfortunate. But like overall, just a big dud. And I think they maybe got the front office, got too comfortable with that big lead. Like, we don't need to do anything crazy here.
Yeah, unbelievable. We will certainly cover it, and who knows where we'll stand if we only record one episode this week, what goes down. So be watching with bated breath. But let's talk about the other race we're talking about, the MVP in the American League. And for much of 2025, similar to the Detroit Tigers, it feels like it was a runaway where Aaron Judge was putting up those video game numbers, cruising towards his 3rd MVP in 4 years. Kyle Riley, everyone discussed it. We were excited about it at the home run derby, the All-Star break. It felt like a nice, fun subplot, then kind of challenge in the MVP. And I understand that might be hindsight, but being here in New York, didn't feel like Raleigh had a chance at actually winning the most valuable player in the American League. Now, with the last week to go, the race is officially, according to Vegas, a dead heat. Both Judge and Raleigh sit at -115 on FanDuel. So we can go through the numbers here. I don't believe it's really a case outside of the catcher position and the value that position adds to it. But you look at the numbers across all the board. I mean, Judge has him beat in so many of the overwhelming statistical obvious layers here. 326, 451, 672. Judge is the MLB leader in average OBP, slugging percentage, OPS, OPS plus, F-WAR, and B-WAR. 49 home runs, 105 RBIs, 130 runs, 12 stolen bases, leads AL in runs and walks 114. He's on pace for a 10 WAR season, and if not for a brief midseason elbow issue, he's essentially lapping the field in all the advanced metrics. His OPS is 174 points higher than Raleigh's. He's outpacing by more than 100 points in OBP alone, which is a huge gap. He's not just hitting home runs. He's really been the most complete offensive player in all of baseball. You want to talk about impact on the team's success. The Yankees they clinch a playoff spot tonight. You know, without Judge, where are they? Plain and simple. He's been their anchor. Obviously, you can look at Volpe's regression. Stanton was injured for a lot of the year. You want to talk about that. And obviously, even after the elbow injury, pushing the DH role, he still played 146 games. So it's not like he missed a whole bunch of the season. As far as Raleigh, like I don't want to understate it, because he's had a great year. For Judge, though, he'll be the third player ever to hit 50 home runs and win a batting title, the first in 69 years. We compare a lot of Raleigh with Mickey Mantle because he passed his switch hitter mark. Mickey Mantle in 1956 and Jimmy Fox in 1938. It's rare air for Judge. So if they gave it to the 21st best offensive season ever by a catcher, that would set a record. Kyle Raleigh would have the worst batting average ever by a position player, winning MVP at 247 currently. The separation in WAR is huge as well. The rate stats, counting stat, like I don't think you can make the case here outside of just sentimental, good story type of stuff. Judge is the MVP. Voter fatigue be damned.
So I just want to put it out there. I'm undecided. I'm an undecided voter here, and unfortunately I can't vote. But I'm undecided, but I have to make a stronger case for Cal Raleigh here because it makes for good pod. All right.
Sure,
but I think there's a lot of ways to go, to be honest. The last few days, I've seen more and more pathways to why Cal Raleigh should be the MVP. And I'm not going to sit here and diminish anything that Aaron Judge has done. Okay, I will say I think the injury and then having to DH more hurts him a little bit. And I understand Cal Raleigh DHs sometimes, but that's because he's a catcher. What he's doing as a catcher is not just a great season. It is historical season. And here's the thing. Baseball is a game that has always been in love with records. He has a bunch already, and you could argue how important they are, but he has the record for home runs by a catcher, home runs by a switch hitter. It broke Ken Griffey Jr.'s Mariners record. And like has that number 60 and then Judge's AL record in sight. And that might, if you pass that, maybe that changes the conversation a little bit. We put a poll out that said like how important or would it cement Cal Raleigh's case if he reached the 60 mark? Not necessarily breaking the AL record, but just the 60 mark, because that 60 number has always meant a lot, in my opinion. The vote was interesting. And I'm not looking at the updated, but it's hung around 60% yes. It would cement his case. Now, maybe a lot of those voters have already said in their mind they think Cal Raleigh is the MVP and they don't need the 60 number. We don't know. We can't get in their heads. But I thought that was interesting. I like to look back at other MVP races. The average thing has been brought up the most. Like, how can a guy with a 247 average win the MVP? He couldn't if he was not having an historic season. But he is. And we're also in an era that has discounted batting average more and more and more and more and more. And I understand Judge is leading in most categories other than home runs and RBIs. It's so interesting that one of the arguments for Cal Raleigh winning MVP is the Maris Mantle MVP race, 2 Yankees. Mickey Mantle that year had a 10.5 B WAR. Maris had a 6.9. Mantle has him easy in that department. Mantle, basically like Judge, has every category except home runs and RBIs. Seriously. Maris hit 61. Obviously, all-time season. There's been movies, books, everything about it. Maris won because of that number 61. He won because of a record. All right. And Cal Raleigh has now several records under his belt. We've seen nothing ever like it from a catcher. So I think, interestingly enough, that MVP race is very interesting to look back at. Now, if I want to go on the other side, because I've been going back and forth playing Jekyll and Hyde the last couple of days, I just find this so intriguing. 1999, Mark McGwire hit 65 home runs and 147 RBIs. Now, I know we look back and know there were steroids involved. Sosa had something very similar, just a little under McGwire. Neither of them won MVP. Chipper Jones did, because he's the better all-around dude. Very much like an Aaron Judge type of season. The only thing he trailed McGwire in was home runs, RBIs, slugging percentage, OPS as well. So McGwire maybe even has a better case there. But Chipper Jones gets that in a season he batted .319, 45 home runs, 110 RBIs. Better average, better all-around season. So that's a case for Judge. If we look at historical MVP races from the past and compare them to this one. So you could support different ones with different races. I saw what I thought was the best argument for Cal Raleigh just actually a few minutes before we came on here. This comes from Jim Mylock of Pod of Fame on Twitter. This is what he says, and I want you to respond to this guy. I think this was very, very well put. He says, I'm in the Cal Raleigh for MVP camp. He's leading the AL in home runs, 58, and RBIs, 121. He's caught 118 games. Johnny Bench led his league in home runs and RBIs in 1970. and 1972. He won MVP both years. He caught 139 and 129 games, respectively. Salvi Perez is the other catcher to do so in 2021. He caught 124 games. He finished 7th in MVP that season. Judge is having an incredible year, an MVP year. He is going to win the batting title while hitting 50-plus home runs. His 209 OPS plus is ridiculous. The thing is, there have been 28 other seasons where an outfielder has recorded an OPS plus of 209 or higher. 28 other seasons. No other catcher has ever hit 50-plus home runs. Raleigh has a shot at 60. It is a 1-of-1 season. He destroyed the records for home runs by a catcher. He has caught the 4th most games in the major leagues this season. He plays great defense. His team is in first place. He has earned MVP. That 1-of-1 season, it almost gets me to not be undecided and go on Raleigh's point. I know the batting average. I get it.
Yeah, no,
baseball is such a game of history.
It's a great argument. I mean, the thing is, if you're putting more emphasis on a position, I don't think catcher should have a head start on positions where measuring players as equal offensive production. So there's no doubt, in my opinion, that Kyle Raleigh is one of the more remarkable seasons we've seen ever, no matter position. I mean, for catcher, it is unprecedented. And I think that a year that Mariners will talk about for decades, Mariner fans, is about obviously if they win the division, tied with this is legendary stuff. I just think if we're measuring the offensive dominance paired with the WAR advantage, and then obviously the impact on a playoff team, it is all there for Judge to walk away with this. And if we're using this as a who hit the most home runs and who has the most RBIs, that's a different award to me. I think the best overall hitter by nearly every rate metric has been Aaron Judge. OPS plus, as I mentioned before, WRC plus, WOBA. That matters as if you're voting for the best player honored. And you can make the distinction on who's more valuable. And there's been this debate year after year. You can even go to Cabrera's Triple Crown year where, you had the historic storyline there. And obviously WAR plus rate dominance trumps counting stats. That has always been the case here. And you can find things here. But if Raleigh does hit 60 and you get to 62, 63, I think it does tip the balance. So it doesn't matter what I say. Doesn't matter what you say. It feels like if he hits that number, that could be the tipping point where he becomes the MVP. Because as of right now, you have the all-around greatness. There is a voter fatigue for the Aaron Judge. We talked about this last week. The LeBron James effect. If you're the greatest player, it's almost like the bar is reached. You have to do something historical, special. You're being graded against yourself. I think that's playing against Aaron Judge. And also, let's not forget the Yankee Stadium piece. That favors home run hitters. But if you look deeper into the numbers, he's not padding the numbers. The road OPS is above 1.100. So you have those numbers in place to say Judge is the overall better player. There is a narrative momentum behind Kyle Raleigh. So if we're making a prediction who's going to win, I'm still predicting it's going to be Aaron Judge. But it's not unprecedented that this could happen because, as you mentioned, there is a romantic nature to have writers vote for baseball awards, and Kyle Raleigh kind of checks all those boxes. And I think the Roger Maris comparison is well taken because that is a huge example that eventually people fall in love with story, and these writers are going to make the final call after the season plays out. And as far as Aaron Judge, he was robbed of the MVP in 2017. I don't believe he would be robbed. I think that's been a lot of the narrative. If Raleigh wins this, I'm not going to sit here and bring my pitchfork out and go to the New York and go talk to Major League Baseball. I think I'm sure Aaron Judge in a quiet moment would rather have a World Series ring than an MVP.
Oh,
and I think if it comes with the category here, but what we're seeing here is a nice storyline that is layered with already two teams that are competitive that we may even see face off in a big series of who decides to get to the World Series. And the 60 home run number, that is a sacred number in baseball. So I understand what you're saying. Right. That is a romantic number that fuels this narrative. The defensive metrics for Kyle Raleigh have to be considered too. Top 10 in framing, +7 fielding run value, started 116 games at catcher. It's the toughest position in all sports. He's done all this at T-Mobile Park. Let's not forget that. That's MLB's most pitcher-friendly venue. I mean, he's been the Mariners MVP. He's been the heartbeat. They're chasing that division crown, but I don't know. I'm still voting for Judge. I don't have a vote, but if I did, it'd be Aaron Judge. And I think we both made a good case for both sides.
I think we should have votes. But anyway, there is a little other wrinkle in here, especially with Cleveland's recent success. Jose Ramirez, who is as consistent as ever. Our friend Rich, who always supports us, so props to him. He's a Cleveland fan. I should put that out there. Big Guardians fan. But he put out a tweet today that I thought was at least interesting, that apparently Jose Ramirez has 62.9% of the positional player WAR for Cleveland. So of all the position players adding up to team WAR, he has 62.9% of it. And that's the most by any player by far. I think Judge was like 20%. I think Cal Raleigh was like 15% of the Mariners' positional players. And so Rich's argument is, if we're talking about who's most valuable to their team, Jose Ramirez should be the MVP. That's
Sure.
the age-old argument. Is it the best numbers, best player, or is it who really had the most value to their team? It's a tricky argument that's never going to be solved. Do you buy into that all? Percentage of the team's positional player WAR?
You gotta. I think there's something to it. If you look at that Cleveland lineup, it's Kyle Manzardo, Stephen Kwan, and Jose Ramirez. The rest is a AAA lineup. I'm sorry, that is the case. So like Cleveland, and they're not blowing the walls off offensively. We already discussed that, but there is an argument at the core of the MVP that no one has fully defined for anybody. So it's at the writer's discretion when they vote. What does the most valuable player mean to that person? I think it needs to be clearly defined. Is it the best offensive player? Because that's usually the Hank Aaron Award, by the way. It's who's the most valuable player, and Jose Ramirez deserves votes. He will get votes. But
my problem with that argument, though, is like you're almost rewarding. I love Jose Ramirez. Let me just put it. You're almost rewarding him because the rest of the team's not that good. You know, you're punishing Judge for having better players around him. You're punishing Cal Raleigh for having better players around him. So I can't quite buy it. I get the argument, and I always have kind of wished that MVP was voted for more so of like who literally had the most value for their specific situation. But it's just not typically how it ends up going.
And it starts with putting emphasis on the Hank Aaron Award. If you want to be able to differentiate between MVP or the value on your team, it's value in the Hank Aaron Award. No one cares about the Hank Aaron Award. It should be valuable. It should be one of those things where you look at as the main offensive attribute. But no, it's an MVP. You want that sitting on top of your fireplace at your home. You want an MVP trophy. So it is interesting. And the Jose Ramirez thing, I saw you tweet about this, and I can't agree with it more. I'm sick of everyone saying Jose Ramirez is underrated. He's not underrated. He's properly rated.
Stop calling him underrated. Yes,
he's an all-time Hall of Fame caliber player that will eventually have a plaque in Cooperstown. Can we stop saying he's underrated? I think it's like, oh, what? Because you play near Lake Erie and you play in Cleveland, you're underrated. Like, come on, Jose Ramirez has been in big moments. Everybody, if you're a baseball fan, you know who Jose Ramirez is. Stop saying he's underrated.
How many tweets can we make over the last 1,000,000 years saying he's gushing about him and then saying he's underrated? Like I was all on board with that campaign to stop using the word underrated for Jose Ramirez.
So let's talk about some of the playoff clinching teams, and the Yankees joined that club today, but the Jays were the first to clinch the American League. We had the Brewers clinching the Central, the Padres clinched the playoff spot as well. So let's start with the Jays. They were the first AL team to clinch. They beat the Royals 8-5. They reached 90 wins. They lost tonight, but they snapped a 4-game skid to cut their AL East magic number to 4, thanks to a season series tiebreaker over the Yankees. The Yankees are only 1 back at this point, so the AL East is still very much in question. So the first division crown since 2015 is what they're chasing. The number 1 seed in the American League, home field through October. All these things are important. They do own the tiebreakers over New York, Boston, Seattle, and Detroit, which gives them an edge if it comes down to as a tie at the top of the standings. As far as the Brewers go, they're the NL Central champions for the 3rd straight year, 5th time in the last 8 seasons. So Cubs lost in Cincinnati, locked it up, giving Milwaukee a first-round bye, home field for the division series. They also hold a tiebreaker over Philly, meaning the Brewers are in strong position to finish the NL's best record. And honestly, we did in our preview. It's a step. Pacoda never saw this coming. They were a projected 80-win team. They're the top seed in the league. I don't think anyone saw this coming. They took players off. They've lost. The additions of the team weren't there, but they're the Milwaukee Brewers. I think it's time, as much as we want to say Jose Ramirez is not underrated, we got to stop doubting the Milwaukee Brewers every turn of the way. Is it possible they're just an organization that knows how to win at this point? It's not about the players. It's about the organization behind them.
They're great at developing players. They know how to just kind of put an all-around roster out there. Great at developing lots of arm. I give it to their development. And Tim Dillard, former Brewer, current Brewer analyst, when he was on here with us. And when he was on, by the way, the Brewers were in bad shape. It was pretty early in the season, but they were in bad shape. And he was very nonchalant of like, yeah, they're going to be, I think they're going to be fine. And you and I are probably sitting there like, well, he's employed by the team. Like, he's got to say this. But honestly, I think he meant it. He also made a point to say, like, you wouldn't believe the players they have in this system. And we've seen it. Like, they're constantly able to plug holes. You see the jump that a guy like Bryce Terang made from last year to this year. Incredible. Christian Yelich, which I'm extremely happy about this, has had one of his best seasons in a long time. That guy is such a likable dude. I'm very happy for what he's been able to do. And, if the Mets are not in there, it's going to be hard for me not to root for the Brewers. Just there's a lot to root for them. So, yeah, I think the Brewers are in great shape. I do think they're kind of one of those franchises at this point. You just have to feel like they're always going to be there no matter what, no matter who stepped out the door and left. It seems like they know how to be okay. Blue Jays, I think they're in great shape too. I know they really want that division and they don't have it yet. I think they're a very well-rounded team too. Hopefully they get a healthy Bo Bichette for the playoff run. That bracket, the way it looks right now, is super interesting. We could get a wild card round of Red Sox Yankees, which must see TV. Mm-hmm. And the winner could potentially face the Blue Jays next round. We still have some figuring out to do, but I hope it stays that way. I feel like that's great theater. And then the Padres, I believe in them a little less than those other two teams right now, just because their offense seems extremely streaky, comes and goes. And if Manny and Tatis are not going as you need them to go, I think they're in some trouble.
Yeah, the celebration was definitely awesome to watch last night, and they had Freddie Fermin delivering the winning single, deadline pickup for them. Manny Machado was drenched in beer. They had to FaceTime Fernando Tatis Jr. because he was out with some flu/COVID situation where he's still not with the team right now. So hopefully they can get him right. San Diego still has a chance to track down the Dodgers in the NL West, as unlikely as it is. They're trailing just by 2.5 games from the Dodgers, who also clinched as well. And they currently hold the tiebreaker over the Mets, but not the Reds. So if the season ended today, the Padres would be heading to Wrigley for a wild card series against Chicago. So as far as what's next, we saw the Yankees clinch tonight. The Blue Jays' magic number to clinch the AL East is still sitting at 4. So they lost the first against Boston. They have 3 to finish up the season against Tampa. As far as the Brewers, they already clinched the bye. Magic number for the number 1 seed in the NL is 6 over the Phillies. And the Padres, they clinched the playoff berth, as we mentioned, chasing the Dodgers in the NL West, and the Cubs for the top wild card spot, 2.5 back from that. So all these different paths, the projections of what this bracket will look like is certainly fascinating. The fact that you got division rivals facing in the extended wild card series, that's pretty recent. We've seen it in recent years, but to have a first round 3-game set between the Yankees and the Red Sox is stress inducing for sure, but it makes for good TV. And a lot of these teams, like with this field taking shape at this point, we've known that these teams are going to be involved here. There is the things that could be upset. Like you could add the Reds to the fold, or maybe the Diamondbacks somehow sneak in. Outside of it, it's very unpredictable. And we had this conversation going into October. And of course we will preview the postseason coming forward, but there's no dominant team. Like I understand Milwaukee, 95 wins. They've been fun. But would it shock you to see them not make it to the National League Championship Series? Like, have they been that dominant all year? I just think it's an absolute crapshoot, and there's a lot of parity in the league that you can be proud of if you're Rob Manfred and all the executives around baseball.
I think both leagues are completely unpredictable. NL, I think, is a bit of a powerhouse. And the AL, I think there's some really good teams with flaws. I really think anyone can make the run. If Detroit still gets in as a wild card team and not as the division winner, I don't know if I think they have a chance because they're really going to be limping in. But yeah, I think overall, like no matter how this bracket turns out, it's a fun one. I think it's going to be a wild ride.
Well, as sexy as the word pitching chaos was last year, that is traumatizing for Tigers fans. 'Cause it shows you that outside of School Bowl, and we mentioned the deadline that they did not make the move for the rotation. Yes, the prices were enormous for some of these guys, and giving up your future to get into a playoff bracket that is largely a crapshoot. That's not going to guarantee you a ring, and watching the players develop into these superstars down the line. It's a hard pill to swallow. But when it's out there to grab, to put the final pieces in what would be a division crown and eventually a playoff berth, you have to take the opportunity, because what's it all about? It's not about collecting these players. And we You talk about the Baltimore Orioles building their team just to win it their way. It's about raising the trophy at the end of October. And a lot of these franchises don't seize the opportunity. And maybe it's because they watch teams like the Diamondbacks and teams like the Reds sell at the deadline and still have a chance to sneak into the playoffs and do something dangerous. Because raise your hand if you want to face the Cincinnati Reds in a 3-game set. I don't think there's anyone out there that wants to face that goddamn team, and they could be dangerous. Offensively, yeah, there's a lot lacking, but if Ellie De La Cruz decides to wake up from the power nap he's taking,
Well, he has. He's hit a couple home runs recently.
And then add that rotation in place, and Hunter Green looks every bit the ace he was supposed to. That's a team that I think nobody wants to face come October.
By the way, Hunter Green, Paul Skeens tomorrow night. Huge matchup. Hunter Green obviously coming off the complete game shutout. Skeens, I actually think, had a little bit of a rough outing last time. But in a moment where the Reds are, trying to get that playoff spot with their ace on the mound, but against Skeens, like that's good TV.
Yeah, I was looking at, because I have my other Roto League I'm in the championship for, and I was looking at the advanced stats. I had Brady Singer pitching, and he's been good his last 7 starts. And if you look at the advanced stats against in a division rival, the familiarity, he pitches so poorly against Pittsburgh, and he gave up 4 earned runs today. For whatever reason, Pittsburgh has the numbers of some of these Cincinnati starters.
Pittsburgh's playing well too recently. Like, I think that people look at the schedule blindly, like, oh, the Reds have the Pirates and the Mets have the Cubs. So the Cubs are on a losing streak, and the Pirates have been playing good baseball down the stretch here. So it's not always simple as just looking at the uniform. Like, you got to see how the team is playing at the moment.
All right, well, let's step to the curtain here for another fun segment that Devin came up to. And we know baseball and football really sit at the heart of American sports culture, and the experience of a fan really couldn't be any more different. But we want to take the opportunity to have some fun, because I know a lot of people are into the football season, and we want to be able to come up with the MLB versions of NFL players. So Devin has a list here where he had come up with an NFL player, a superstar player, if you will, faces of the league. And we have to come up with an equivalent in the Major League Baseball and tell you guys why they are the equivalent of what they do for the Major League Baseball and what their attributes. I mean, there's a lot of creativity we can bring to the table here.
Yeah, I think this will be fun, and maybe we'll do this a few times during the NFL season. We picked 8 players here, so Steve and I are going to go back and forth. I'm going to start here with Patrick Mahomes. So I thought about this for a while, and the comp I came up with is Mookie Betts. A few reasons why, and you go a million different ways, like why you think they kind of compare to each other. A couple obvious ones: they each have 3 titles under their belt. I'd say they're both kind of in the middle of their career still. Both of them have got off to slow starts in 2025. I think if you've watched Mahomes, hasn't looked maybe like typical Mahomes so far as being, explosive offense for the Chiefs. And we all know what happened with Mookie for the beginning of the season this year. And overall, just like they're stars, but they can kind of let other guys on their team take the spotlight and be talked about a lot. Like, obviously Mahomes has Travis Kelce with all the Taylor Swift stuff that kind of gets so much publicity, and Mahomes can kind of just do his thing. Mookie Betts, not that he's never talked about him, he has his own podcasts, but Shohei Ohtani's there, Freddie Freeman's there. Like, these other guys are there to get a lot of conversation. So Mookie Betts equals Patrick Mahomes in my mind.
So you also tossed the assignment of finding the equivalent of Josh Allen in Major League Baseball, and this is pretty easy for me. Knee-jerk reaction was Aaron Judge. You just go with the overwhelming size, the power, most valuable player output, as we discussed before. We already discussed Judge's line. We also know what Josh Allen is at full tilt, what he brings to the table. Unstoppable downfield. He carries the offense, and you can look at him by the end of the year. He'll live at the top of every leaderboard in the NFL as far as the advanced statistics and as far as just the basic ones like touchdowns and yards per pass, etc. There's a he can do it himself factor between both players, and I think you can carry a team across the finish line. There's a can-do attitude, and it's just they're undeniable. So I think Aaron Judge is my comp for Josh Allen.
And both still looking for that ring. Like, they're great, but they haven't gotten that last piece. I think that's a good one. That's a good one for sure. All right, next one I thought was a little more difficult. Jordan Love, your guy, quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. This is the one I came up with. I think it might be a little bit of a stretch in some places, but I'm going with Roman Anthony. I'm going to tell you why. All right, so the Packers, obviously historic franchise, and they've had this line of quarterbacks now, Brett Favre, and all of a sudden you go right from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. This doesn't happen for many football teams. Usually, if you have a franchise quarterback, when he's gone, you suffer a little bit. I, as a Giant fan, can tell you that's the case.
Shout out to Jackson Dart.
Yeah. Let's see what he does. But anyway, and now we're going to Jordan Love, who also seems to be like, oh, this guy's a really good quarterback. Uncrowned, seems to have all the skills, and we're still kind of waiting. Roman Anthony, a lot less time under his belt, and that's the biggest hole you could poke in the argument. But I think similar, the Red Sox, historic franchise, and they've kind of gone from the Manny Ramirez, Pedro Martinez to David Ortiz to Mookie Betts to Rafi Devers, and I think Roman Anthony is the next guy up. We know he has the tools. Can he lead the Red Sox into their next successful period? So I'm going to say Jordan Love is Roman Anthony as far as MLB NFL comp.
Definitely interesting. There is the historic value of the Red Sox, and that uniform means something just as the Packers uniform does. I like that one. Speaking of the Packers, you gave me Micah Parsons, and I had to find someone to equal what he brings to the table. And this was challenging because he's a disruptor, and I had to find someone who disrupts offenses, and that's Paul Skeens. I think everything
I like
Paul Skeens. He shows up, he tilts the field in the direction. We know what the Pirates can do and can't do, but we know when Paul Skeens shows up on the mound, he's a guy you have to watch. I think that's Parsons off the edge. We watch him attack quarterbacks, puts them in their place. There's an overwhelming leadership trait that Parsons has that we know Paul Skeens has. This guy is a bulldog. He makes an instant impact, and he's the centerpiece of the game plan. If Paul Skeens is standing on that rubber, you have to game plan for him and what he's going to bring to the table. So I'm going Paul Skeens. He's an absolute difference maker. And who knows, maybe we see a trade just like Micah Parsons. Maybe Paul Skeens finds himself a new home somewhere.
See, that's what I would have gone with. I would have gone with the trade connection, and I probably would have gone with Rafi Devers because like a shocking trade.
Sure.
But yours is way more creative as far as a disruptor, making it hard on the offense. I like that one a lot. All right, so my next one is Lamar Jackson, and I'm going to go with Jose Ramirez here. I think perennial MVP candidates, neither have been able to quite get over that hump, but the talent, the numbers is always there. Pretty soft-spoken. Like they just go out and do what they do, just have an air of confidence about them without them having to parade around and tell you about it. You just know what you're going to get. Consistent dominance. And I think that's rare. So Jose Ramirez will be the Lamar Jackson of Major League Baseball.
So you gave me Tyreek Hill, and we know what he could bring to the table. And this was challenging because, again, the skill set that he brings, he's a difference maker. And I was looking for speed, so that narrowed it down to some players. I went with Corbin Carroll, and we look at what he can do on the field, obviously stealing bases, 30-30 season this year, but also defensively. First step, this guy is able to defend really the entire outfield if he needs to. The guy can be a difference maker out there defensively. And Tyreek, if you watch him on the field, I understand the Dolphins haven't been the same team. Tua can't really get him the ball. But Thursday Night Football, he was able to get a touchdown, and he's always finding a way to be open. He changes leverage for the secondary. Look at both of how they're built, smaller frame. I think their impact kind of outsizes like physically what they're on the field doing, and then the constant panic for opponents. I think Corbin Carroll offsets things. If he gets on the base paths, he can find a way to really disrupt the pitcher's rhythm, and then Tyreek Hill finds a way to really disrupt offenses. Obviously, not the same Tyreek we're seeing from Kansas City days, but Tyreek is still a difference maker. He put the ball in his hands.
Luckily, Corbin Carroll doesn't need to rely on a quarterback to make his game better, as Tyreek Hill unfortunately does. All right, so my last one, we'll add a little comedy in here. Russell Wilson. Who is the Russell Wilson of Major League Baseball? I mean, funny enough, Russell Wilson could have been the Russell Wilson of Major League Baseball.
Mr. Unlimited.
Baseball player. Yeah, Mr. Unlimited. All right, so I'm going with Charlie Morton. Just because, and this is not a skill set thing. This is an aging veteran that is clearly just a bit washed now, and teams keep on giving up on them. So Russell Wilson, Charlie Morton, both once upon a time, very, very good players, very well respected, and years down the road will both be seen as, hey, that guy was really good. Lots of good moments. You won't necessarily remember Russell Wilson's Giants moments or Steelers moments. You'll look back at the Seahawks Super Bowl moments. Charlie Morton, you'll think of him Braves, right? Maybe even before that as well. But great players once upon a time, looking like maybe they need to step away soon at this moment. So Russell Wilson, Charlie Morton.
Well, speaking of great players, you gave me a good one to end this little segment we have here. You gave me Aaron Rodgers, my boy from back in the day. He was the Packers quarterback for many years, gave me a nice, memorable Super Bowl. And this is apropos for what's going on here in the world with our news, and we will talk about in a second. I'm going with Clayton Kershaw. Inner Circle Hall of Fame. Their peak was generational, both these players. And I think when the dust settles on Clayton's career and we're able to really take a look behind the curtain of who this player was, they've done it under the brightest lights, carrying iconic franchises. Rodgers and Kershaw, Packers, Dodgers. Rodgers, battling age, injuries, off-field narratives. Kershaw doesn't have that piece here, but Kershaw has battling diminished stuff. Maybe he'll make a start in the postseason. You got the October scars we will discuss because that's been a big narrative with Kershaw retiring of what's his legacy. And I think the same with Aaron Rodgers. I think the weight of expectation played a big part of both these players here. Each can still flash brilliance, and you saw some of that from Clayton this year. Rodgers flashes when healthy. I think there's some moments like, oh my God, this is the player I've watched growing up. The full body of work. And I think the question for both of them, can they win one more? I think it's more reasonable for Clayton Kershaw to go out there and get one more. But Aaron Rodgers, maybe a tougher sell with the Steelers this year. And how do we place them in history? I think historically they both line up pretty equally to each other.
You decided to be nice for Aaron Rodgers. I thought maybe you might go the drama route, but
I've softened a bit on the Rodgers piece, not just like lining up. I just think accepting him for who he is, as far as like he's just an eccentric guy, and I've grown to appreciate once he's removed from the Packers system of causing the drama and behind the scenes. He gave me a Super Bowl ring. I have to be very happy about that. And he's been a model citizen in Pittsburgh thus far. He really has been.
Yeah. All right. That's fair. That's breaking news right there. Steve is okay with Aaron Rodgers now and accepts him for who he is. I like this segment. I think maybe we'll bring this back, not weekly, but maybe a couple weeks from now, 8 more NFL players that are in the news and try to find their MLB comp. I think we did an okay job there.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a good one over here, tying in with football, and we'll maybe find other sports. Maybe we'll do an NHL one if we feel so froggy here. But let's talk about Clayton Kershaw.
All right, Clayton Kershaw.
Clayton Kershaw. We talked about all the 18 seasons in LA. He's calling it a career, and you can go a couple routes here. He's not opting to do the retirement tour that we saw from Mariano Rivera, that we saw from Miguel Cabrera, where they got all these prizes and gifts throughout time of going to these different cities. He decided to just announce that 2025 will be his final season. He was emotional reflecting on this. And I think if you watch Clayton Kershaw, this means a lot to him. He said, quote, "I think finishing the season healthy makes the right time to retire." So he was wiping tears away to the media. You look at the numbers here, 222 wins, the ERA is under 3, 2.54, over 3,000 strikeouts across 28, 44 innings. He 3 Cy Young Awards, the MVP back in 2014, 5 ERA titles, 11 All-Star selections, 2 World Series rings. He's the definition of a one-club player. I mean, you really don't have that many throughout the history of baseball. Most notably, I think of Derek Jeter. But he's synonymous with the Dodgers, which brings us to the conversation of the legacy. And I want your opinion on this because there's been a lot of defense preemptively about Clayton Kershaw and the postseason struggles of, and it was mostly these writers that are defending, and justly so, because you don't want to define everybody by one moment in the postseason or 2 moments in the postseason. And he has had good moments, but it's almost like these writers are getting ahead of themselves before anyone criticizes them, where they're almost making it the narrative, ironically, by saying, no, you can't talk about the postseason struggles. 4.4 playoff ERA, 39 appearances, fueled years of narratives, October failure. And I don't know. I mean, Dave Roberts even came out and said this in a post game. He's like, he talked about the playoff blemishes, and he said, quote, "He never ran from the responsibility. With that, you've got to take on scrutiny. Everything wasn't optimal for him." I don't know. Where do you stand on this? Like, if you think of Clayton Kershaw, you close your eyes, an unapologetic opinion you have of him. Do you think of the dominance I just talked about, the 222 wins, or do you think of those moments giving up big hits in October? Because it's hard not to think about those things. It is.
Yeah, long term, I'll think about the dominance. Don't get me wrong. I'm always going to remember that he really struggled in the postseason. I think that's a well documented thing. He's had a lot of rough moments in the playoffs for such a prestigious all time pitcher. He's had some. The playoffs just didn't match with him. But overall, I think of that 12-6 devastating curveball, one of the best we've ever seen. I think about his 2014 MVP season. We know how rare it is for a pitcher to win most valuable player. If you go back and look at his 2013, 2014, and 2015 seasons, the numbers are insane. I spent some time doing this the other day when he announced his retirement, which, by the way, I think the timing of the announcement is there's a little bit of strategy. I think he's known all year that as long as he stayed healthy, for the most part, this is going to be his last year. I think announcing it gives the Dodgers a little extra motivation at the perfect time. And I mean, they're also in a pretty good place right now with their health as far as compared to other parts of the season. So I think they're as dangerous as ever. But I look back at that 2014 season. I'm going to give you a couple of crazy facts about that season. In 2014, he was the first guy ever to lead the majors in ERA for 4 straight years. Some people say he threw the most dominant no-hitter of all time that year. And this is why. He had 15 strikeouts in that no-hitter against the Rockies, June 18th, 2014. Did not walk a batter. The only blemish came on a Hanley Ramirez error. I remember Hanley Ramirez there. So, yeah, I mean, some people ranked it the first all-time among 9-inning no-hitters and second only to Kerry Wood's 20 strikeout one-hitter among all 9-inning starts. So some people hold it in that high a prestige there. Other things about that season. This is cool because this is kind of something that doesn't happen anymore. Pitchers batting. He was still batting at that time, National League pitcher. He had a higher on-base percentage than opposing players did against him. I'll repeat that. He had a higher on-base percentage than opposing batters had against him. I think that's pretty damn cool.
There was an opening day. He had a home run, and Madison Bumgarner hit a home run the same game.
He finished the season with a 235 on-base percentage. He held opposing hitters to a 231 on-base percentage. That's really cool. One of the coolest stats I've ever seen. In June and July that year, he went 10-0 with a 0.94 ERA. He didn't pitch at all with the bases loaded until August 27th. Just crazy. Best career ERA at that time of any starting pitcher since 1969. Now that's back in 2014. So things have adjusted, but just an incredible player. There's a million ways to state and prove how incredible he is. But yeah, long-term, I will think of him as the dominant left-handed 12-6 ridiculous curveball. And yeah, asterisk, he wasn't great in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think Andrew Friedman came out of, obviously, the Dodgers president, and he had a quote talking about he had to pitch countless times on short rest. He stayed in games too long because of the thin bullpens, and he shouldered burdens that he said would have broken lesser arms. And then preemptively defending him, I guess my question to you, and you don't have to go long, from knee-jerk reaction, would you rather have the career of Madison Bumgarner being known for being a postseason dominant player or a Hall of Fame career like Clayton Kershaw?
I just think Clayton Kershaw, the way he's going to go out, like not a lot of guys get to go out. I think it's really cool that he finally had a pretty healthy season and could do this. We know the last several years how hampered he's been by mostly back stuff and some other things as well. I just think it's a really cool way to go out. One uniform, Hollywood. Bumgarner, yeah, absolute dominance, but shorter career, ended up in a Diamondback uniform. That's one of those things like, Joe Namath in a Rams uniform. Yeah. You just don't want to think of it. And unfortunately, that's part of it. So Kershaw, there's all those rumors for a couple years. Like maybe he's going to go play for the Texas Rangers hometown. No, he always stayed with the Dodgers. And I think that's cool. So I'll listen, nothing against Madison Bumgarner. Unbelievable. But I would take Kershaw's career.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's been a discussion for quite some time. They've been interchangeably compared, obviously, the Giants and the Dodgers, longtime rivals, and they've pitched countless times against each other. And Madison Bumgarner had the big moments in October, but you can't take away the 2 rings that he had a part of, 2020, 2024, as far as Kershaw. No. So it's not like he didn't win in October. It'd be a different story. We're going to finish up our conversation here in the meat of the order with Mike Trout. And we know he hasn't been Mike Trout we're used to seeing here this year, and he'll be the first to admit that. But Saturday night at Coors Field, we got one of those flashes to remind you exactly who he is. So he had his 400th home run, a 485-foot blast into the left center bleachers. Perfect timing. He had the power, and he became just the 59th player in MLB history to reach 400 home runs, and now only the 20th to do it entirely with one franchise. 34 years old. He's already the Angels all-time leader, and now he joins legends like Dave Winfield and Vladimir Guerrero, and they also hit milestone home runs in a Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim uniform. You look at all the stats of Mike Trout. We already discussed the Hall of Fame resume, Clayton Kershaw. Mike Trout could easily have a bust in Cooperstown in very short order. He's now one of only 5 players to ever have 400 plus home runs and 200 plus steals by the age of 33. A group that includes Willie Mays, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, and Alex Rodriguez. He also holds a unique StatCast record, 3 home runs of at least 485 feet, more than any other player since that tracking began. So I don't think we really need to discuss his season this year because it's about milestones at this point. I think we are still close to seeing a renaissance season from Mike Trout if he can stay healthy, if you put him in the right lineup and the right environment. I still hold out hope he'll wind up in Philadelphia, his hometown crowd. It's a reminder for me that all the setbacks, we're building a career that really places him among the all-time greats. A career that when we look back on, we should remember the sheer brilliance that Mike Trout brought to the table. And it will be kind of marred in what could have been if the Angels surrounded him with the talent. Because as much as Clayton Kershaw struggled in October, Trout never got that opportunity, which almost sucks more.
Oh, definitely sucks more to like not know, what you could do there. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad he got it done this year. I know you said we don't have to talk about his season this year, but like a 1.3 F4 player this year. Like we've talked so many years about how Mike Trout, the Angels have let him down. I don't want to say he let the Angels down, but he certainly wasn't bringing them up very much this year. I'm just trying to figure out who Mike Trout is now, like what kind of player he is. Legendary career. Not going to take that away from him. But going forward, I saw someone on Twitter, like the second he hit his 400, say, congratulations, Mike Trout, for 400. Hey, when do you guys think he's going to get to 500? You know what my answer was right off the bat? I don't think he gets there. I don't think he gets to 500 home runs with the player he is now and with the health concerns. I mean, I'm glad to see, similar to Kershaw, that he was mostly able to stay healthy this year. A little hiccup there. I think back towards the beginning of the season where we were kind of like, this might be the same thing as last year, meniscus kind of stuff. But he came back and he's been on the field. But yeah, I think Trout, I think we're going to start to see kind of his twilight. I hope you're right and I'm wrong. I hope that renaissance is still there. Whether it's in an Angel uniform or not, I've given up on the trade stuff because, I mean, with that contract and at 1.3 F4, who's trading for him? So, I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I hope he is a 500 home run player because I think for many years we thought it was a matter of when, not if. But now I'd be very, very surprised if Mike Trout joins the 500 home run club, to be honest.
Yeah, sadly, I think you're correct in that regard, unless like we see a renaissance, as you mentioned. He did play 124 games this year, his most since 2019, but the stat line is not what it usually is. 229, 358, 414, not even close to what his career looks like. So
lots of strikeouts too. Lots and lots of strikeouts.
Yeah, just not looking like the same player. The other thing we have to mention as well was the fan connection piece. There's a fan named Alberto who caught the home run barehanded, which was an awesome catch. He returned the ball in exchange for signed bats and playing catch with Mike Trout. We saw this happen with one of the Yankee fans that caught Stanton's milestone home run as well, and they didn't want anything back. Of course, they met Stanton, they gave him the ball and all that. That's really cool. And I think what we see from these fans is the appreciation of the memories that they gave him. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alberto was just traveling to Colorado, just randomly checking out the ballpark, and he happened to catch. Can you imagine? Like, you're just checking off Coors Field off of your bucket list, and you wind up catching Mike Trout's 400th home run. So really awesome moment. We got to appreciate the moments while they're here. Mike Trout, one of the greatest we're ever going to see play, burned really, really bright. But as you mentioned, it's not going to burn for much longer, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just don't think so. I don't see it, unfortunately. But that renaissance, there's still that glimmer of hope that we get that. And I think every baseball fan roots for it.
And it really, really sucks. We have not seen him get the opportunity. If you look at the lack of postseason appearances, and we make the case, obviously, he hasn't helped the Angels case this year, but years in the past, like, they weren't pulling their weight. They weren't supporting the talent. And the fact that we only have one playoff series from Mike Trout, it's disgusting, really, honestly. It's a missed opportunity. There's other examples of it throughout the history of other sports, but Mike Trout might be one of the most egregious as far as superstar players not getting the opportunity to shine bright outside of their market on national TV. It's just been really, really disheartening to see. But we're going to come around third here, and we're going to talk about what we're looking forward to for the rest of the weekend. All right, so as we come around third here and wrap up the episode, Devin nailed it on the head. We were going to go 2 hours. We're going to skip Red Hot Ice Cold, unless you want to give your Red Hot Ice Cold during this segment. And we already discussed a lot about what we're looking forward to, because it really feels like October already. It feels like the playoffs already kicked off, and for a lot of teams, they have. Obviously, watching the Tigers and the Guardians is a de facto playoff series in its own right. Detroit's reeling. Cleveland is surging right now. Detroit lost the Scooble start, and the division is going to be possibly decided with the rest of these head-to-head. As far as the AL East go, obviously trying to see if the Jays can lock this down. And the Yankees are still lurking 1 game back. The Red Sox are clinging. They're playing apart. Toronto and the Red Sox are playing head-to-head. And that National League, man, I'll let you speak to it. The Reds and the Mets in this final wild card spot. It is butt clenching time, nail biting time. It is nerve wracking around baseball. Every game matters. And really, the postseason has effectively already began for these teams.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm watching, sometimes I like to give a couple answers or go away from the Mets because it's too obvious. It's the Mets this week with a bullet. Let's go Mets. 2 more against the Cubs, and then Miami, which to a casual baseball fan might be like, oh, I get the Marlins. First of all, Marlins have been a very hot team, one of the hottest in baseball. And second, they have a history of playing spoiler to the Mets. The Marlins apparently pushed Sandy Alcantara back.
Let's say that they're lining
so he
it
could
up.
match up against them. So like, this is not lost on them. It's just crazy stuff. So I'll be tuned into that. And yeah, you know what? Let's squeeze in. We're going to try to end right on 2 hours. Red hot, ice cold. I'm gonna go rapid fire here. My hot, Matt Olson over the last 2 weeks for the Braves, 339, 6 home runs, 14 RBIs. He joined, and I'll give credit to Ben Weaver, former guest of ours, from Tomahawk Talk, covers the Braves. He posted this. Olson joined Chipper Jones as the only Brave to ever have at least 25 home runs, 40 doubles, 90 RBIs, and 90 walks in a season. And Chipper did that in his 1999 MVP season that we actually mentioned earlier in the show. So shout out to Ben Weaver for that. Other red hot, Emmett Sheehan. Wow. This dude, I am wishing that I picked him up even though I was out of the playoffs at the end of the year so I could potentially keep him as a certain type of keeper. I think this guy has future star written all over him. He's starting to show it for the Dodgers. Over his last 5 starts, he leads the league in ERA 1.15, 12.06 K per 9. He looks like he could be a true weapon for the Dodgers in the playoffs. Like, they've got to be ecstatic with what they're seeing from him. My cold, Giancarlo Stanton, interesting case. Got a couple home runs over the last 2 weeks. Historic one, 8 RBIs, 51.2% K rate. You can't be doing that, even with the home runs. That's some nasty stuff. And then very quickly to finish up, Aaron Nola, last 6 starts, 5.77 ERA, just continues to struggle. He's my cold on the pitching side. You got to wonder how or if he's going to fit into the Phillies' postseason plans.
I'll just give you one cold for me, and it's from a playoff team, the best record in baseball. Jackson Torrio, looking at what he's done through 57 games right now, he's battling 246 a week, 286 OBP, only 7 runs scored, 1 home run, 6 RBIs, and 0 steals. So we're not seeing any power. The speed production's not there. He's having some poor on-base skills, and he's a liability right now, which is interesting because we see a lot of the great stuff happening in Milwaukee, but Jackson Torrio, who's a guy who's a bright spot for what they do, he has not been that player, and we'll see if he can get it going when it really matters and the lights are shining bright in Milwaukee, trying to bring a World Series title over there. But we appreciate you guys checking this episode out. If you want to support our show, you can follow us on social media at Tablesetters Pod on Instagram and also on the X Machine. Devin posting clips, having conversations over there, posting polls as well. So I think that Cal Riley getting to the 60 home run mark, cementing his case for MVP, that poll will be over, but Devin will be sure to be posting more polls and conversations. The way we structured our episodes last year, talking about the postseason, we did obviously once a week, and a lot changes from week to week, especially in the postseason. You almost have full series is just disappearing away. We're going to be coming up, and hopefully we'll get some more guests on here, not spoiling anything, but we do have some connection with some players or maybe future guest here. So we're working hard to bring you guys insight into what's going on largely around the game from different insights. So stay tuned for that. We will drop all the linkage and all the things happening on social media, of course, pictures, sharing all that stuff. So, and again, if you can leave a 5-star review, it helps us in the algorithm, other people to find our show and continue to support the love of Major League Baseball as we all do. Stay focused on baseball. October is coming, the wild card series, and wait with bated breath, man. It's going to be a fun ride to the end.
Yeah, buckle up. And I think baseball is about to take the stage again. I know football's in full swing, but I think especially with this last week, I think it's starting now, and I don't think people are waiting for the playoffs. Like, this is such an interesting last week of baseball with so much on the line that I think people are tuned in. Even those people that maybe put their eyes a little more on football a couple weeks ago are starting to tune back in.
So everybody stay tuned in, and we will be back soon talking about all the playoff ramifications once we have this locked up. But until that time, we will talk to you after a while.